My family skipped my graduation for a ski trip, then called me 37 times demanding $4,800 for my brother. But I exposed him and ruined his future. My name is Rob, I'm 23 years old, and I've been the background child in my family since I can remember. Not the black sheep, but more like the unseen one. I was never the troublemaker, but neither was I the kid my parents brag about at dinner gatherings. That honor belongs to Daniel, my older brother. He's the golden boy. Charismatic, athletic, the type of person who can overlook someone's birthday and still make them smile at the conclusion of the talk. I was the quiet one, head buried in books, striving for accomplishments that didn't picture well on Facebook. Graduation day was supposed to be different. I'd worked for years to get here, endless late nights, part-time jobs, and extra hours to pay tuition gaps when scholarships weren't enough. I'd pictured that moment for years. The stage lights, my name being called, and my family in the audience roaring loudly enough for me to hear them over the applause. I even reserved them the nicest seats in the auditorium. But that morning I woke up to a text in the family group chat from my mother. "We won't be able to make it today. Something came up. We'll celebrate soon." I sat there staring at my phone for a solid minute, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. I scrolled up to see if they'd clarified, but the next message came from Daniel. "We're heading to Aspen for the week, totally last minute, can't wait." Mom responded a minute later with a series of skiing emojis. No apologies, no awareness that my college graduation, the first in our family, was in less than 4 hours. I didn't respond. I could not. My throat tightened, and the walls of my apartment seemed smaller. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe they assumed my ceremony was later in the week, but they knew the date. I'd been discussing it for months. I issued them an official invitation from the institution, as well as a reminder, last week. They simply chose something different. I chose him. When I came to college, I tried to put it aside and concentrate on the present. Friends and classmates were present with their families, snapping photos, carrying flowers, and laughing in groups on the grass. I smiled when others praised me, but the pit in my gut continued to grow. Every time I looked toward the place where my family should have been, I only saw strangers. I persuaded myself it did not matter. I promised myself I'd remember the pride, not the empty chairs. Then my name was called. I stepped across the platform, shook hands, smiled for the photo, and then felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. It was my father. A text message said, "Come home immediately." There is no explanation, simply that. When I came off stage, I noticed the notifications piling up. "We missed 37 calls." The same message was repeated, "Come home now." I did not respond. Instead, I stared at the screen, my diploma in one hand and my phone in the other, wondering what was so necessary that my family, who had skipped my graduation for a ski trip, now asked that I drop everything and rush home. And as I stood there in the midst of the crowd, the clamor of joy all around me, I felt something change inside. A cold, calm knowing that whatever was waiting for me at home was more than simply something coming up. This was the beginning of something bigger. I didn't realize it at the time, but that day would forever separate my family's past and present. And I was about to discover how far the schism would go. When I returned to my apartment that evening, still wearing my graduation gown because I hadn't bothered to change, I discovered 3 more missed calls from my father, and 1 from my mother. No voicemail, no explanation. Simply the same 2 words. Come home. I sat at my modest kitchen table, which I bought secondhand when I moved out, and stared at my phone. I didn't hear from any of them during the ceremony. There were no congratulations, no photo requests, and not even a text to acknowledge the event. They were now treating me as if I had arrived late for an emergency about which I was unaware. Mom's message arrived an hour later. "Your brother needs you. It's important." No context, no questions about my well-being or how the ceremony went, just straight to Daniel. I could practically hear the tone behind it, which was the same as I had grown up with. In our household, Daniel's difficulties were familial issues. Mine was mine. If Daniel scraped his knee, the world came to a halt until he could get a bandage and a bowl of ice cream. If I sprained my wrist at the gym, Mom urged me to walk it off because she was busy. I realized early on that my function in the family was not to be cared for, but to be useful when someone else, usually Daniel, needed anything. I did not respond right away. I set my phone down and headed to the fridge to get something to eat, only to discover I had been too busy studying for finals to adequately grocery shop. I poured myself a bowl of cereal and sat there, reflecting on how Daniel had eclipsed every big milestone in my life. My high school graduation, He'd been discovered having a big party the night before, so everyone was talking about how much trouble he'd gotten himself into. When I started my first job, he damaged his automobile that same day. So, instead of applauding me, everyone in the family group chat started talking about insurance claims. Around 9 p.m., my phone vibrated again. My dad made a video call. Against my better judgment, I responded. Dad's face filled the screen, his look tense and impatient. Rob, finally, we've been calling you all day. I was busy, I replied bluntly. Graduating. He did not even acknowledge it. Daniel is in trouble. He needs you to come over tonight. Now. I didn't see it. What kind of trouble? Dad groaned as if I were being unreasonable. His credit cards are maxed out, and he can't pay the balance. He was counting on you to help. I looked at him. He counted on me. I didn't even realize this until 10 seconds ago. You're good with money, Dad replied, as if that clarified everything. You've been working all through school, saving up. Daniel wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. My jaw was tightening. You skipped my graduation to go skiing, and now you're asking me to bail him out. It wasn't about skiing, Dad replied immediately. But I could see the ski lodge behind him in the video, with its wood-paneled walls and beautiful chandelier. Daniel had been stressed, and we thought the trip would help. You know, he's been under pressure lately, right? I said, my voice cold, and I guess I haven't been. Dad's demeanor changed, revealing that subtle flash of annoyance I'd seen my entire life. The unspoken message, don't make this about you. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank wall opposite my couch. They didn't only miss my graduation, it was expected that I would willingly set aside my own life to clean up after Daniel. It has always been like way. When he failed a class in college, I was forced to do his assignments for one semester. When he ran up a tab at a pub, I was guilt-tripped into paying it back because family sticks together. But nevertheless, family never stayed with me. 2 days later, I received another call. This time from Daniel himself. He didn't bother saying hi. Hey, so when are you bringing the money over? I'm not, I said. There was a pause, followed by a laugh. Come on. Don't be like that. You've always helped me before. Yeah, I said softly. And you've never once shown up for me. Not for my graduation, not for anything. Why should I help you now? He scoffed. Wow. So, you're going to hold a grudge over some ceremony? You're being petty. The term petty struck harder than it should have. When I spoke up for myself, they would always say the same thing. They saw my boundaries as overreactions, not boundaries. By the end of the week, I'd received texts from every family member I could think of, including aunts, uncles, and my grandma. Everyone is telling me that some variation of Daniel is your brother. You can't just let him fail like this, and don't sacrifice family for money. No one addressed my graduation. Not one. The problem was, I hadn't even turned them down because of the money. I had said no because I was exhausted. I'm tired of being a safety net for a man who has never learned to stand on his own 2 feet. I'm tired of being invisible until they need me. And the more they pressed, the more I knew they didn't regard me as a member of the family in the same way they did Daniel. I was a resource, and a tool. What I didn't realize was that their pressure campaign was only getting started. The texts, calls, and subtle digs were all leading up to something much bigger, something they believed they could force me into. And they had no idea that as they pushed, I began to plan how I would push back. It wouldn't be long until they offered me the perfect justification, and once they did, there was no turning back. It was a peaceful Thursday morning when the actual blow came. I had just completed sending out a couple job applications for roles I'd been fantasizing of since college, when I received a call from my bank. The woman on the other end was courteous, but anxious. Mr. Rivers, I just wanted to confirm a large transfer request we received from your account earlier today. I sat up straighter. Transfer request? I haven't authorized anything. She read off the details. Nearly $4,800 will be wired to a joint account in Daniel's name. My stomach sank. Cancel it, I said quickly. That's what I thought, she answered. It was initiated online from an IP address registered at your parents' home. I didn't need a detective to put things together. My parents kept my old banking login from when I was in high school, and they insisted on keeping a check on things to ensure I didn't overspend. I had never updated the password since I trusted them not to use it without my permission. I suppose that faith was misplaced. I hung up the phone shaking, not from anger, but from the calm, bone-deep understanding that they had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. This was not a request for help. This was not even a guilt trip. This was stealing, pure and simple. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about how they felt entitled to take from me without asking, because in their opinion, it wasn't my mine to begin with. Before I could decide what to do next, my phone rang again. This time, Daniel texted, "Thanks for covering it, man. I'll repay you when I can." A winking emoji followed, as if it were a friendly joke between brothers. I didn't respond. My hands were too tight around the phone, white knuckles. I recalled every instance in which they had made me feel insignificant. Every time my accomplishments were overlooked. Every time I was told to be the bigger person, whereas Daniel got away with anything. It was evident that they didn't expect me to just pick up the pieces when he made a mistake. They felt I owed it to him. I called my mother. She responded cheerfully, as if nothing were wrong. "Rob, we were just talking about you. You should come by this weekend." "Did you authorize a transfer from my account?" I inquired, my tone colder than intended. There was a pause. Not the pause of someone perplexed, but the pause of someone deciding what reason to offer. "Oh, sweetheart, we knew you'd help your brother. He's in a tight spot, and we didn't want to bother you with the details while you were busy with school things." "You stole from me," I replied. Her tone sharpened immediately. "Don't be dramatic. We're family. It's not stealing when it's for someone you love." Something inside of me moved when I heard those words. For years, I allowed that perverted definition of love define how I was treated. But it struck me at that very time. Their idea of love was simply a term they used to justify taking anything they desired from me. I hung up before she could continue. The silence in my flat felt piercing, like if it had edges. My diploma was still lying against the wall where I had left it after graduation, unframed and unopened. As I glanced at it, I understood it was more than simply a piece of paper. It was proof that I had created something for myself despite them, despite being repeatedly disregarded, and despite being treated as a backup plan for their beloved kid. That night, I updated all of my passwords, including bank accounts and email. And as I did, I reflected about the 37 missed calls on graduation day, how they had made my milestone about Daniel's ski trip, and their entitled notion that my hard-earned money was theirs to take. They'd taken the opening shot. They made it plain that they would not respect any boundaries I placed, and I had a feeling they expected me to rage quietly before forgiving them as usual. They were mistaken because this time, they didn't only injure me. They'd given me a cause, the ideal reason to finally cease playing the character they'd assigned me. And, in the coming days, that rationale would serve as fuel for something unexpected. What I didn't realize was how far they were willing to push me before I acted. But I was going to find out. The next few weeks were like navigating through thick fog. I went through the motions, sending out job applications and attending a few interviews. But my mind was elsewhere. Every time I opened my banking app, I expected to see something more missing. I kept my phone on mute because I couldn't handle the incessant buzzing from family members, each with their own gentle reminder to let things go for the sake of family harmony. The story they were promoting was expected. Daniel was stressed. Daniel was suffering. Daniel did not aim to cause any harm. I was the chilly one for causing a fuss about it. The robbery had been reframed as a misunderstanding, and my resistance to give in was fueled by a grudge. It was surreal. I wanted to shout every time someone told me I was acting unfairly, but I didn't. I did not give them the satisfaction of hearing my frustration. Instead, I pulled back. I stopped attending Sunday dinners. I stopped answering phone calls unless they were from numbers I didn't recognize, in which case it was a job offer. I stopped checking the family group chat completely. When I eventually opened it one night out of morbid curiosity, I discovered a series of images from the ski trip. Daniel poses with his friends, holding champagne. There were laughing emojis and statements about enjoying life to the fullest. My graduation? Not a single photograph. Not one word. That hit harder than I'd like to admit. For years I tried to convince myself that if I worked hard enough and accomplished enough, they would perceive me differently, that they'd be as proud as they were of Daniel. But the truth was right in front of me. I could cure a sickness, but they'd still make it about him. My finances were tight right now. Graduation had already drained the majority of my savings, application fees, rent, and basic living expenses. And while the bank had reversed the transfer before it went through, there were still processing costs and a hold on my account for several days. I had to get by with what I had left. I skipped more meals than I cared to confess. My apartment felt colder and emptier. It was the first time in years that I felt completely alone. Not only are you alone, but you also lack the illusion of being supported. What is the worst part? My degree should have led to opportunities, but without any actual connections or family support, I was simply another resume in a pile. Every rejection letters was a reminder that I was now on my own, that if I fell, no one would catch me. Unless catching me implied stealing something from me. But here's the deal. In that silence, that isolation, a part of me began to awaken. I started keeping a tiny notepad beside my bed, recording everything that had happened since graduation. Every call, text, and manipulation. I began to reflect on the past, noting down instances that I had previously dismissed. When I read it all together, it was like watching a slow-moving train wreck. Patterns that I had previously ignored were now clear. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I knew I wasn't going to react on instinct anymore. I would not yell, I would not plead, I wouldn't try to persuade them to my side. That had never worked, and it never will. Instead, I planned to wait and watch while they continued to reveal me who they were. And when the time came, I'd have more than simply the determination to defend myself. I would have a plan. The thing was, they hadn't finished with me yet. And before I could put that plan into action, they were going to drive me further than I'd ever imagined. Far enough that I'd be forced to act. At first, the transformation was barely perceptible. I got a part-time research assistant position at a local firm. It didn't pay much, but it offered me enough money to cover rent without depleting my savings. More significantly, it was a foot in the door, a place where my abilities were valued and my work was not always overshadowed by someone else's appeal. My supervisor, Karen, complimented my report writing talents in front of the entire team, and I had no idea how to respond. I wasn't used to receiving public recognition that wasn't immediately followed by a "but Daniel" statement. Nobody compared me to a golden boy. Nobody discounted what I had done. I showed up, worked hard, and people noticed. It was odd and intoxicating in its own subtle way. Within 2 months the part-time job had become full-time. I was now earning enough to not only cover my expenditures, but also to begin rebuilding my savings. I updated my wardrobe with a few professional outfits. I began eating better, getting back in shape, and even joined a co-worker for early morning runs in the park. For the first time in a long time, I awoke each day feeling like my life was genuinely moving forward, without my family's permission or involvement at all. The social transformation occurred next. Derek, one of my coworkers, invited me to a young professional networking event. I almost did not go. The concept of networking made me think of phony grins and shallow chats. But I went anyhow, and to my amazement, I met people who were genuinely interested in what I did and the goals I was pursuing. In the following weeks, I made relationships, exchanged contact information, and even began attending industry mixers. It wasn't an overnight success, but it was consistent, clear growth. And the best part? My family had no idea. I did not make a post about it. I did not send updates. I learned to enjoy the solitude. Every accomplishment seemed like a card I was holding face down on the table, waiting for the ideal moment to turn it over. Financially, I began to pull ahead. By month 4, I had paid off the little debt from my final semester of school. By month 6, I had a growing emergency fund. Around the same time, Karen recommended me for a side consulting job with a startup. It was only a few hours per week, but the pay was more than generous, and it allowed me to practice abilities I hadn't used since my senior thesis. That gig led to another, and before long, I was earning more on the side than I did at my previous full-time job. I knew the version of me they were used to, the silent helper who says yes because it was simpler than fighting, would never have gotten this far. This was uncharted territory. I wasn't simply surviving anymore, I was gaining leverage. Still, I kept my cards near. When my mother called to see if I was doing well financially, I gave her the most generic answer possible. I'm fine. There were no details, no opportunities for them to assess how much they could handle. The less they knew, the fewer targets they could choose. But Daniel could not help himself. He began sending me casual messages again. How are things doing at work, man? Have any plans for the weekend? I realized what it was. A test of the waters. He'd done it previously after our disagreements, gradually returning to my life until he could beg for something. This time, I did not bite. I gave brief, courteous responses, nothing more. Nonetheless, I sensed something was stirring. Call it instinct. Call it years of observing how my family functioned. Their occasional texts had changed tone, polite, even kind, but with a staged quality. I wasn't sure what they wanted yet, but I could guess. Money, favors, or anything that benefited Daniel at my expense. They didn't know they were no longer dealing with the same person. I wasn't the broke, dependent college student they could manipulate with guilt trips. I had resources. I had contacts. And for the first time in my life, I had the ability to say no and have it stay. Still, I did not move first. I knew if I waited, they'd give me the perfect opportunity. They always have. And when that time came, I wouldn't just say no. I'd make it apparent to them in a way they couldn't ignore. The old version of me was gone for good. The moment I had been waiting for was closer than I expected, and when it happened, it was bigger and uglier than I could have imagined. It occurred on a rainy Tuesday evening, 6 months after I graduated. I was just leaving the workplace when my phone rang with an unknown number. The person on the other end presented himself as Mr. Carter, a senior partner in a medium-sized investment firm. "Rob, I've heard good things about you," he added, his tone professional. "Karen speaks highly of your work, and Derek mentioned you're excellent with financial structuring. We could use someone like you for a project we're taking on." I'd learned to put my excitement at bay, so I listened intently. The project turned out to be a complete portfolio restructuring for a local chain of boutique hotels. It wasn't simply a job, it was an opportunity to work directly with high-net-worth clientele and get my name in rooms I didn't even know existed a year ago. The sum they gave for my role exceeded my monthly wage at my usual job. I said yes. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in the task. It was demanding. Late evenings, numerous spreadsheets, and regular strategy meetings. But I was in my element. My input began to affect decisions. Jonathan Reeves, the chain's owner, took note. "You're not just good with numbers," he told me one evening during dinner with the project team. "You understand how people think. That's rare." I had no idea at the time, but Jonathan would prove to be one of the most valuable relationships I'd ever made. He had strong ties to the local business sector and was well known in circles that my family could only dream of entering. Throughout all of this, I was accumulating information. Not because I was deliberately plotting revenge, but because old habits die hard. I'd been keeping that journal updated with every petty comment from my family, every manipulative attempt, and every subtle investigation into my finances. But now, I had something extra. Through casual talks with family friends at networking events, it's surprising what people will share over a glass of wine, I discovered that Daniel had been attempting, but failing, to secure funding for a business venture. Apparently he offered a half-baked plan for a luxury sports club to numerous investors, but none of them would touch it. One remark stayed with me. "If he doesn't get someone to co-sign a loan soon, he's doomed. Your parents are quite concerned about it." I filed that away in the back of my mind. I knew my family well enough to notice the pattern emerging. At some point, they'd try to offer this sports bar as a family opportunity, twisting it as a way for me to help my brother's future. They'd press hard, present it as an investment, and possibly even try to guilt me by claiming it would bring the family together. And they'd presume I didn't realize how horrible Daniel's condition was. Meanwhile, my own standing steadily improved. When the hotel project was completed, Jonathan drew me aside. "You ever thought about starting your own consulting business? You've got the skills, and I've got contacts who'd hire you tomorrow." The concept sparked something in me. Within a month, I had completed the paperwork for my own little business. It was still just me and a laptop in my flat, but I had my first 2 clients before I completed building the website. By the conclusion of that quarter, I'd earned more than I had in a full year at my previous employment. I did not brag. I did not even hint about it to my relatives. I pretended I was still working a low-wage office job to survive. Every time Mom inquired, "How's work?" I'd respond with a vague, "Busy, but good," and shift the subject. The less they knew, the better. In private, however, I was working on something that would give me true power. Not only money, but choices. Options for saying no without fear. Options for walking away without losing anything. Options for fighting back if they crossed me again. And sure enough, that time arrived one Sunday afternoon, when I received an unexpected family dinner invitation. There is no justification given, only that we would love to see you. My instinct told me it wasn't about catching up. This was the setup. I was expecting it. What I didn't realize at the time was how far they were ready to go in order to entice me, or how flawlessly their plan would set up mine. On that Sunday evening, I strolled inside my parents' house with the peace that comes from knowing the finish of a narrative. The smell of Mom's roast chicken wafted from the kitchen, but the atmosphere in the living room was rigid and overly rehearsed. Dad sat in his recliner, hands folded, as if he were hosting a board meeting. Daniel sat on the couch, leaning back nonchalantly, but his eyes were a touch too bright. After the customary perfunctory greetings, Mom poured me a drink of water and added, "We're so glad you could make it. There's something exciting we want to talk about. A family opportunity." I nearly smiled. There it was. Daniel delivered his pitch, complete with printed brochures and a laptop presentation. He discussed the future sports bar, with high-end decor and specialty cocktails, as well as exclusive agreements with local breweries. He utilized terms like ground floor opportunity and guaranteed return. I listened, nodded periodically, and avoided interrupting. When he was finished, Mom leaned in with an expectant smile. "We've already got interest from a few investors, but we'd love to keep it in the family. We thought you could come in as a primary backer. It would be such a great way to bond." "Really?" I asked, maintaining a bland tone. "And how much are we talking about?" Daniel did not flinch. "150,000 to start. But you'd own 30%. Huge upside, man." I placed down my glass and leaned forward slightly. "That's a big ask. So, just out of curiosity, have you told all your potential investors about the loan rejections?" The room became still. Daniel's smile wavered. "What?" "I mean the ones from First State Bank, Harborview Capital, and Westline Financial, the three that turned you down because your projections didn't add up." I kept my voice steady, but I noticed Mom's gaze shift to Dad. I just wouldn't want anyone to feel like they weren't getting the full picture. Daniel's jaws constricted. "I don't know where you're getting your—" I brushed him off with a shrug. "People talk, especially in business circles. And I happen to run in a few now." Dad attempted to salvage the moment. "Rob, this is your brother's dream. You're in a good position now. You could really help." That was my cue. I removed a folder from my backpack and placed it on the coffee table. Inside was a polished bound copy of my firm's portfolio, including clients, contracts, and revenue estimates. All authentic and impressive. "You're right," I replied. "I am in a good position. Good enough to know this isn't an investment, it's a bailout." Daniel's face turned red. Mom's mouth opened, and then closed again. "And here's the thing," I explained, my tone remaining cool. "I don't invest in people who steal from me. And before you say it wasn't stealing, let me remind you. I spoke to the bank. I know exactly who tried to pull money from my account after graduation." That landed like a stone in the water. Nobody moved. I stood and tucked the folder back into my bag. "From now on, I'm done being your safety net. I'm not your investor, your ATM, or your fallback plan. Whatever hole you've dug, you can climb out of it yourselves." I proceeded toward the door before pausing and turning back just long enough to twist the knife. "Oh, and Jonathan Reeves? He's a friend now. His company owns 3 of the city's busiest bars. When your pitch crosses his desk, and it will, you can guess how that'll go." Daniel didn't say anything. Mom seemed to want to speak, but Dad's hand on her arm kept her silent. I went without saying anything else, the rain outside sounding lighter than it had when I arrived. They'd come expecting the same old Rob, the one they could coerce into giving in. Instead, they received the version they had spent years developing without realizing it. The one who had figured out how to beat them at their own game. What I didn't realize until later was how terribly that one evening would unravel things for them. The consequences came faster than I had anticipated. 2 weeks after that supper, I received a text from an old neighbor. "Hey, just saw your brother at the bank." He looked enraged. "Did something happen?" That following day, I received an email from Jonathan Reeves that confirmed my suspicion. Daniel had indeed sent him a sports bar proposal. Jonathan hadn't simply declined. He had forwarded it to a few other major investors in the city, along with a brief professional note, "Not financially solid. Proceed with caution." Daniel's ground floor opportunity was over in a matter of days. Word spreads rapidly in small company networks, and his name became synonymous with overpromising and underdelivering. Every lead had dried up. No bank would accept his calls. No investor wanted to meet. That alone would have been plenty. My parents' reaction, however, clinched the deal. Mom called me late one night, her voice tight. "Do you know what you've done? Your brother's future is ruined. We had to take out a line of credit on the house to cover his debts." I kept my voice even. "I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own choices." There was silence on the line. I could practically hear her swallowing everything she wanted to say. She eventually spoke, softly but coldly. "You've changed." "Yes," I answered. "I have." I hung up. Over the next month, I maintained my distance. My consulting firm expanded, and I relocated to a larger downtown apartment with a skyline view that I'd desired since my freshman year of college. The few mutual friends I still had with my family started to quietly admit what I'd always known. The golden boy luster had worn off, and the cracks were visible. Daniel had gotten into conflicts with numerous of them following his failing business, blaming the market, bad timing, and even me. But nobody was buying it. I last saw him by accident. I was meeting a customer for lunch when Daniel strolled past the restaurant. He observed me through the window, slowed for a second, and continued going. No grin, no wave, just a man who'd learned the person he used to rely on had vanished for good. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty. I felt free. Because they had taught me, in their own way, the most important thing I'd ever learned. When you stop allowing people to treat you as a safety net, you'll quickly discover who is capable of standing on their own. My parents say I'm a bad daughter because I won't force my husband to rehire my brother, who was fired for theft after I helped him get the job. I, a 34-year-old female, grew up in a family-oriented household where everyone is expected to go above and beyond for one another. My parents have always regarded my younger brother, Liam, 29, as the golden kid. Growing up, if Liam got into trouble, I was the one who had to repair it. He crashed my bike when I was a youngster. I was chastised for allowing him to ride it and then given my stipend to help pay for repairs. He failed a class at school. I was urged to tutor him every day, even if it meant canceling my own plans. You get the picture. I became the unofficial cleanup crew for Liam's mess. I adore my brother, but he is reckless, charming when he wants something, and never willing to face repercussions. Meanwhile, I worked hard to establish a steady lifestyle. I went to college, obtained a decent job, and eventually married my spouse, Dan, 36, a male. Dan is amazing, patient, honest, and really hardworking. He began working for his company more than a decade ago and has worked his way up to management. It's not a large organization, but it is a renowned mid-size company in the technology hardware market. Dan leads a team that handles inventory and logistics for high-end electronic equipment. He takes his profession and the recommendations he makes very seriously. Over the years, my parents have had no qualms about asking me for various favors for Liam, such as money for his car repairs or a place for him to crash. We let him stay in our guest room for a short time last year after he ended his relationship with a woman. You name it. They always phrase it as, family helps family. For the most part, I attempted to help when I could, but as I grew older, I also began to place some soft boundaries. I quit lending money after one too many loans that never came back. For example, my folks didn't take it well. Cue the guilt trips about how wealthy I am while Liam struggles, and how I owe it to my family to share the good fortune. It is exhausting, to say the least. Latest request. Liam lost his job again a few months earlier. He has a poor employment history, with brief stints in retail and warehouses. My parents called, not so quietly implying that Dan could get a job for Liam at his company. They discussed how Liam simply needed someone to give him a chance, and how I could stand up for family by asking my husband to do so. I was quite hesitant. As you may already be aware, combining family and business may go tragically wrong. But Liam begged me as well, saying he'd truly straighten up if he had a decent employment opportunity. He promised he'd be responsible and make me proud. I'll admit that I felt for him. He seems earnest and desperate. After weeks of persuasion and seeing my brother almost on his knees, I surrendered. I spoke to Dan. Dan was skeptical, but he agreed to help. He was able to obtain Liam an entry-level position on his team, primarily processing inventory records and assisting in the warehouse. It was not flashy, but it paid well and offered benefits, and that was the foot-in-the-door opportunity Liam had been longing for. Dan made it plain to both me and Liam that suggesting him meant he was taking a risk. If Liam made a mistake, Dan's reputation would suffer. I assured my husband that I understood, and I genuinely believed that my brother would step up, at least this time. For the first month or so, everything seemed fine. According to what I've heard, Liam arrived on schedule and was still learning the ropes. My husband would give me courteous short updates, such as, "Your brother is doing fine." I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that this time the risk would pay off. Okay, so much for that. Not long after Liam completed his 3-month probation, all hell broke loose. The night Dan returned home was unusually silent. He sat me down and explained that there had been an incident at work with Liam. My stomach sank. Dan then revealed that a couple of high-end graphics cards, each worth a small sum, had gone missing from the inventory cage. These are high-tech components that their company supplies. It's a significant loss. They reviewed the security footage and discovered my brother attempting to sneak the goods out of his backpack. Liam attempted to steal expensive equipment from the warehouse and was caught red-handed on camera. I felt humiliated. According to Dan, when confronted by management, Liam initially tried to pretend that he believed them were trash, which was plainly a phony argument. Who would put brand new, unopened electronics in their own bag if they thought they were trash? Then he started begging, saying he needed money and planned to sell them. It was just a disaster. The corporation, like every reasonable organization, has a zero-tolerance policy against theft. Dan stated that HR was involved, and Liam's employment was terminated on the spot. Dan informed me that Liam had been dismissed and escorted out earlier that day. Here's when things get even more difficult. That evening, once I received the news, my phone flooded with calls from my parents. I was hardly processing my own amazement and rage when I responded. A big mistake. My parents were furious at me. Liam apparently ran directly to them after being sacked, claiming that he was wrongly punished for certain lost items. They either believed him or pretended they did. The debate swiftly devolved into them demanding that I remedy this. I tried to explain to them that Liam was captured on camera, and that it was entirely his fault. They would not hear it. My father stated something along the lines of, "Your husband should have protected his own family. Who cares about a couple gadgets? Family comes first." I was stunned. I contended that Dan helped by giving him a chance, and it was Liam who squandered it. Mom began crying, telling me that I should persuade Dan to give Liam his job back since he will struggle again, and it will be partly my fault for not guiding him. She genuinely suggested I should have prevented this, as if I was my brother's keeper. I made it clear to them that I would not ask Dan to risk his reputation by rehiring someone who had essentially stolen from the organization. I stated that Liam is an adult and must face with the consequences of his actions. Well, that triggered an explosion. My mother sobbed even harder, saying I was harsh and merciless to my own brother. Dad practically hissed that I was betraying my family for my spouse, and that I needed to remember where my loyalty should be. It turned into a screaming match, with them accusing me of turning my back on my brother. I ended up yelling back that Liam had done this on himself, and I was not going to cover for him. Dad then issued me an ultimatum. Either I convince Dan to rectify this, reinstate my brother, or find him another job in the company, or I shouldn't bother phoning or coming home. He said, "If I don't help my brother in his time of need, I'm not a good daughter or sister." I was flabbergasted. In the heat of the moment, I shouted something along the lines of, "If that's how they feel, then so be it," and hung up. That was a few days ago. I haven't communicated with my parents or Liam since. After I calmed down, I texted my brother, basically telling him I couldn't help him and wondering what he was thinking. He hasn't answered, but he did post a vaguely theatrical message on social media about backstabbers and family that doesn't support you, which I believe is meant at me. Now I am torn. My upbringing instilled in me that family is everything. I'm sorry things have gotten to this point. A part of me wonders if I should have tried harder to reason with Dan or his company, even though there's little possibility they'd rehire a convicted crook. Another part of me is mad with my brother for being so stupid, and at my parents for expecting me to miraculously fix it. My hubby is totally on my side. He claims that Liam will never be able to or should be able to reclaim his work, and that my parents are wrong to place this burden on me. I know he's correct logically, but the guilt and second-guessing are eating at me because I essentially aided the entire situation by getting him the position in the first place. Did I set him up for failure? So, Reddit, am I the one who refused to urge my spouse to rehire or ignore my brother's theft? Edit. For clarity, many people are wondering why the company did not file charges. Trust me, I was also bracing for that. Dan advocated for my brother, which is the only reason he is not facing criminal charges. Dan was outraged with Liam, but he persuaded his superiors to simply terminate Liam and not notify the police. I believe it was partly out of loyalty to me, and because he didn't want me to cope with the consequences of a family arrest. It was a one-time kindness gesture. Despite knowing this, my parents continue to believe that Liam is the victim in this situation. That's strange. Update 1. Thank you Reddit for all of the responses to my initial article. I'm honestly astounded by how much attention it received and how kind and frankly honest everyone was. It's been a few days since I posted, and I've had time to process things. Reading the comments was eye-opening. Many of you pointed out how absurd it is for my parents to expect me to cover up an actual theft, and that this enabling behavior has most certainly been ongoing for a long time. That truly struck me because it is true. This dynamic did not arise overnight. I was lying awake last night remembering another occurrence from years ago. When Liam was in his late teens, he was caught shoplifting in a mall. Instead of confronting him with the consequences, my parents mediated the situation through the store. They knew the owner, therefore no charges were brought. I begged them to let Liam face the consequences so he might learn. Of course they wouldn't. He received a token penalty at home, including a week of grounding, which was subsequently pushed under the rug. They even informed our families that it was a misunderstanding. Liam learned nothing from the experience except that mom and dad were always there to help him out. That was one of the first times I knew my parents would manipulate reality to protect him. Anyway, your remarks left me with a lot to think about. The verdict was overwhelmingly not what I expected, but I needed to hear from neutral people. You all also helped me see how much my family's toxic dynamic has pushed me into this fixer role. Many of you said, if you keep catching your brother when he falls, he'll never learn to pick himself up. I'm taking it to heart. To address some popular queries, how did this affect Dan's job? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. There was some blowback. I asked Dan if he had gotten in trouble for endorsing Liam. He admitted he had an extremely awkward conversation with his superiors. Essentially, he had to repent for vouching for someone who later stole and commit to be more cautious about referrals. It was embarrassing for him. I feel terrible. He put his neck out to help my brother at my request, and it burned him. Dan, being the sweetheart he is, does not blame me, but rather Liam. But I still feel bad since my family brought him into this situation. Does your sibling have a history of such behavior? Aside from the shoplifting case above, I believe so. He's been fired from at least one prior job before. At the time, my parents said that the manager was out to get him. But knowing what I know now, I wouldn't be shocked if Liam also played a role in the firing. My parents have a habit of minimizing or concealing his mistakes. It was as if they were training me to see him as blameless, so that I would continue to assist. Have your parents always been so biased, enabling? Oh sure. My parents have continuously enabled Liam, placing the onus on me to be the responsible one. If he messed up, I was supposed to correct it or cover for him. This trend dates back a long time and it appears to have not changed even now that we are grown-ups. So, here's what I've done since my first post, owing in large part to your recommendations. Many commenters asked me to be firm and establish clear boundaries. Some even suggested considering limited contact or no contact if my parents continue this behavior. That thought is difficult for me. As dysfunctional as things are, the prospect of losing my parents and brother completely is terrible. But I know I can't continue living under their thumb. I have not officially declared no contact or anything. I sent my folks a beautifully crafted email. I took a day to draft it because I wanted to be firm, yet calm. In the email, I emphasized my love for them and Liam, but what they're asking of me is incorrect. I emphasized that I cannot and will not ask Dan to compromise his career by rehiring Liam or finding him a new position. I emphasized that Liam's choices have repercussions, and that this is his responsibility, not mine or Dan's. I also emphasized that I will not participate if they only intend to throw insults or ultimatums. Basically, I informed them that I'm willing to discuss, but not if they continue to be abusive or expect me to perform miracles. I sent the email the day after my post went up. So far, no reaction. I know they witnessed it. I received a read receipt, which is one of the benefits of working in an extremely detailed workplace. Their silence is quite telling. It feels like they're using the silent treatment to punish me for not obeying. It sucks, but I'm bracing myself. I also tried to reach out to Liam. I texted him. I'm here if he wants to talk about what happened or needs advice, but I can't undo what he did. He did not respond. Instead, he shared another cryptic social media message about false individuals and those who prioritize others over themselves. He also uploaded a pathetic selfie with the comment, "Betrayed by those closest to you." It's so dramatic that I would chuckle if it didn't hurt. I see the silence as a sign. They're most likely waiting for me to break down and apologize. Old me definitely would have by now. But after hearing all of your points of view, I know that holding firm is the appropriate thing to do. I have not blocked anyone. I want to leave the door open for courteous communication, but I refuse to pursue them. One other thing, some of you strongly recommended treatment, both for myself to unlearn this guilt and conditioning, and for Liam, though he wouldn't go until pushed. I took the initial step and began searching for a therapist for myself. I haven't found the proper fit yet, but thanks for the push. That is where things stand. A tight impasse. I'm standing firm, taking care of my mental health as best I can, and hoping that time will bring my parents and brother around. I won't lie, a part of me still thinks they'll reach out willing to discuss rather than demand, but I'm not holding my breath. I'll keep you updated if anything changes. For the time being, I'm preparing myself for the long haul. Update 2. I wish I could say the impasse ended on a nice note, but alas. Silent treatment as a weapon is not new in my family. I remembered a time in high school when I defied my parents over something little. I refused to cancel our plans to tutor Liam. They retaliated by freezing me out for a week until I gave in. That was their strategy: remove affection and acceptance until I fell back into line. So, what about mom and dad's silence during the previous few days? Not surprising. I recognize the approach, and with my husband's and your support, I'm determined not to give in this time. However, it appears that my parents have far more ridiculous techniques than simply giving me the cold shoulder. Dan arrived home from work a few days ago, visibly agitated. He informed me that my father had phoned his company. Yes, my father emailed Dan's employer, essentially to protest about Liam's termination. In the email, Dad accused Dan of failing to defend his family and depicted Liam as a victim of an unfair company. He even claimed that the corporation overreacted and that Liam just took those products since he wasn't earning enough to survive. What? It was a flurry of guilt tripping. We're family, how could you do this? And minimizing. It was only a couple of gadgets, nothing major. I was absolutely ashamed. Fortunately, Dan's supervisor is smart. The employer called Dan only to say, "Please ask your father-in-law not to contact us again." He wasn't angry with Dan, but rather perplexed and little amused that my father thought a sob story would outweigh a theft. Dan apologized to his supervisor and told him that it would not happen again. I can't express how outraged I was. Who does this? Who tries to harass their son-in-law's workplace because they are upset that their other son faced consequences? This went too far. That night, I sent my parents another email, this one more shorter and angrier than the last. I told them not to interfere with Dan's job again. I told them that if they had any respect for me, they would stop immediately. I warned them that if they pulled another act like that, it would irreversibly ruin our relationship. Honestly, it could already be beyond repair. I sent it, then contacted my mother because I was too outraged to confront Dad directly. Mom responded. She sounded exhausted and sorrowful, as if I was pressuring them into these drastic measures. She added, "They only went behind my back because I refused to help your own brother." She then asked, "What were we supposed to do? Just let him suffer?" The conversation ran in circles. She insisted they had no choice because I refused to help. I continued telling her that what they did was utterly unacceptable. She reiterated Liam's precarious situation and how his parents are doing everything they can to help him. I pointed out that they always seem to expect sacrifices from me or Dan. It fell on deaf ears. I will admit that I lost my patience. I basically remarked that if they don't realize how messed up everything is, I'm not sure what else to say. So I hung up. We've gone back to silence since that call. No response to my irate email. No follow-ups. Just nothing. The next day, I received a snide text from my brother saying, "He yelled at Mom." Nice. I did not answer. It is irritating. He is letting our parents fight his battles and then seeming smug when I am furious. The lack of self-awareness is staggering. For the time being, my primary focus is on my own household. Dan has been nothing but helpful, and happily, his company considers the situation resolved after attributing it to a wayward family member. We spend our evenings quietly, and he constantly telling me I am doing the right thing. I must have asked him 20 times, "Am I really wrong?" And he would simply hug me and say, "No, you're right." I don't know what happens next. Maybe my parents will keep pretending I don't exist unless I bend. Perhaps another storm is brewing. Honestly, I'm prepared for anything. Update 3. I expected things to quiet down, but instead I got one last emotional roller coaster with my family. My mother has always had a softer touch than Dad. She dislikes open conflict and prefers to act as a mediator or guilt tripper. When I was younger, if I upset Dad, Mom would come to me later and say, "You know your father loves you, he's just disappointed." She would then pressure me to apologize or obey for the sake of the family. She's a quiet enabler, the type who will say, "Please do this for us," making you feel much guiltier than yelling would. A few days after my last update, Mom contacted me directly for the first time since the whole debacle. She left a voicemail stating that she wanted to talk and would come over alone if I agreed. I had mixed sentiments. Mom came over the next evening. Dan stayed home to provide support, but he allowed us privacy by hanging out in the backyard within earshot. When I opened the door and saw my mother standing there, fatigued and teary-eyed, I almost broke down. I hugged her, and we sat in the living room. She began by stating she missed me and regretted that we weren't talking. I told her I missed her, but she quickly eased into the same plea, saying, "This situation with your brother has gotten out of hand," and my father was beside himself with grief. She implored me to rethink assisting Liam, not necessarily getting him his former work back, but perhaps I could ask Dan if he knows of any jobs for Liam, or utilize my contacts elsewhere. Essentially, if I don't bring him back into Dan's firm, can I find him something else? She described it as a compromise. I listened, trying to remain cool. Then I gently but firmly told her, "Mom, I've tried to help Liam so many times. I got him the job, and he lost it because of his own actions. He has to face the consequences and find his own way now." I also expressed how hurt I was that they turned on me and Dan, especially with the work email stunt. Mom was in tears the entire time. She kept adding, "You don't understand how difficult it is for us. He's our son, and we can't just let him fail." I responded that I understand they love him, but protecting him from consequences just hurts all of us. I even applied some of the advice I received from you people about how protecting someone from failure ensures they never learn. She did not raise her voice or yell at me, she just grieved silently and said, "I'm so sorry it's come to this. I wish you could find it in your heart to forgive him and help him." That completely crushed my heart. I also started crying. I responded, "I don't want our family torn apart either, but I can't be the one to fix this. Not this time." For a moment, we simply held hands and cried together. I hope she now understands. But then she whispered, just above a whisper, "Your father says he won't speak to you until you make this right." I have no idea what to do. Then she inquired, "Is Dan really not willing to give him another chance? Just one more. Maybe in a different department?" That's when I realized she still hadn't understood what I was saying. All she could think about was me finding a magical solution for Liam. I shook my head and said, "No, Mom. Dan can't and won't do that. It's not about willingness. It's just not possible or fair. Liam burned that bridge." I reminded her that Dan had already gone to bat to avoid legal ramifications. If things had gone differently, Liam might have a criminal record. She nodded, but I doubt it sank in. Mom finally stated softly, "If you won't help at all, I don't know how to convince your father. He feels like you've turned your back on us." I was exhausted and choked up at this point. I corrected myself. "I'm sorry he feels that way, but I have to look out for my own family and myself too. I can't do what he wants." She looked at me for a long time and said, "We love you. I hope you'll reconsider." I led her to the door. We hugged again, both still crying. I told her I adored them and that my door was always open if they wanted to talk, as long as it wasn't about me repairing Liam's life. She nodded, but made no promises, and then departed. That was the last time I saw my mother in person. There has been no further communication since that visit. It seems uncomfortably unsolved. There was no breakthrough. They're still locked in their perspective while I'm stuck in mine. Dad has not contacted me at all. He appears to be holding firm until I correct the situation. Mom is sad, but will not overtly oppose Dad or the mission to save Liam. My brother has not contacted out either. I suppose he's simply lurking behind them and waiting. Following that encounter, I was in a state of sadness for the next 3 days. Thank goodness for Dan, who was there to embrace me while I sobbed. It is one thing to stand your position in a heated situation. It's another to witness your mother cry and remain firm. Final update. It's been a while since I last updated. I wanted to give it some time to see how things would settle. It's been several months, and I wish I could give a more positive resolution, but reality isn't a sitcom. The short version is that we are still estranged. My parents have not contacted me, nor have I contacted them in any meaningful way. We didn't even communicate during the customary family gatherings or holidays that passed, which was a first in my life. It was unfortunate to miss out on those traditions. I will not lie. I spent one holiday evening ugly crying on the couch because I was waiting for my mother's call, which never arrived. Meanwhile, I've learned a few things about my family through word of mouth. According to a cousin, my parents eventually found another employment for Liam. Apparently my father asked an old buddy for a favor to get Liam an entry-level position at another company. So my brother is currently employed. True to tradition, it appears that even when I'm not around, my parents continue to bail him out through connections. I hope he doesn't waste this opportunity. However, given history, I have some worries. Regardless, it alleviated one of my concerns, my brother's long-term financial struggles. He has a job. Whatever he does with it is entirely up to him. I've been focused on my personal well-being. I did eventually find a therapist and have been seeing him on a regular basis. It's been quite beneficial to talk about everything, the guilt, the rage, and the loss of practically losing my family, at least for now. My marriage, thankfully, is stable. If anything, this event drew myself and Dan even closer. We've had a lot of conversations about boundaries and the type of family environment we want if we ever have children. Dan has been my rock throughout all, reminding me that I am not cruel or heartless, that I have the right to set limits, and that I am not defined by my parents' approval. I honestly don't know how I would have made it through these months without his constant support and the validation from so many of you on Reddit. Do I still have hope for reconciliation? In a way, yeah. They're my parents and brother. I'll probably never give up hope that we'll be able to make things right. I'd love to have a relationship with them that isn't based on guilt and enabling, but I've realized that I can't change it. They would have to meet me halfway, and they have not demonstrated any willingness to do so thus far. Accepting this has been difficult, but it has brought me some peace. If they never return, I will be sad, but I will live. My door is still open if they ever chose to speak to me as a daughter rather than a resource to be exploited. Meanwhile, I'm doing the best I can with my life. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to comment and provide me advice and moral support. I truly feel that without the perspective and encouragement I received here, I would have crumbled and caved in to my family's demands, as I always did. My family used me for years, then told me life would be easier if I disappeared. Now I sued them and took everything all back. My name is Evan. I'm currently 27, but my story began last year, on my 26th birthday. It was meant to be a regular celebration. Nothing fancy, just a little gathering at my parents' place, as we have done every year as I can remember. I stopped expecting anything big from them a long time ago. To be honest, I was mostly there for my little niece, who loved birthdays regardless of who they were, and the carrot cake I prepared myself, knowing they'd never get it right. I strolled in that day with the cake in one hand and a bottle of cheap wine in the other, detecting a strange tension in the air, but I ignored it. I always did. The dining table was set a little haphazardly, as if my mother had slapped it together last minute. When I arrived, my sister Brielle was at the table, browsing through her phone and scarcely looking up. My Uncle Joel has had 2 drinks, and my father. He stood near the window, wearing the same worn-out sneer he always had when I entered a room. The one that said, "You're not really part of this." I set the cake down and feigned a grin. "Happy birthday to me, I guess," I muttered, partly joking. Nobody laughed. We sat down to eat. Nobody had bothered to ask what I wanted for supper, so it was lasagna. Again. I'm not against lasagna, but it wasn't about the food. It was about effort. Or lack thereof. I attempted to make small chat, asking Brielle about her position at the design business, mentioning my own recent promotion at work, which I had worked hard for, and even asking my mother about the garden she used to enjoy talking about. Silence. And then came the moment that ripped the rug out from under me and ruined any last hope I had for healing our fractured family. My father raised his glass of whiskey and remarked, "You know, Evan, if you vanished tomorrow, life would actually be easier for all of us." There was a moment of stillness. I thought, no. I prayed I had misheard him. Perhaps that was a bad attempt at black comedy, but Joel laughed as if it was the greatest thing he'd heard all day. "Man's got a point," he snorted. I turned to my mother. Her expression was blank. Not surprised or offended, just vacant. She said nothing and did not even flinch. Brielle stuck her fork into the cake, took a mouthful and said, "Well, you do always stir things up." I couldn't move for a while. I stared at them all. I wasn't sure whether to cry, yell, or simply walk away. My throat felt tight. My chest burned, but I didn't say anything. I gently rose up, nodded once and said, "Got it." I then departed. There was no scene or yelling. I just walked out into the night, drove back to my small apartment, and sat in the darkness for hours, trying to figure out what had happened. Do you know what hurts the most? That wasn't even what my father had stated. It was how casual it was. Like I was simply a minor bother they'd rather not deal with. I did not sleep that night. The words echoed in my thoughts. "If you disappear tomorrow." So I decided to do just that. Not out of spite, at first. I just needed to be gone, somewhere they couldn't find me and couldn't reject me as a piece of clutter. The next morning, I packed my bags. I didn't have much, but I packed everything important. My paperwork, laptop, and a few framed images from happier times. I contacted my supervisor and used the 3 weeks of vacation I had saved. I did not inform anyone where I was going. I turned off my phone. I disappeared. I went to the cabin. My grandfather used to own a little quiet cottage in the woods. When he died, it sat untouched for years. No one in the family cared if it was too remote, too rustic, lacked Wi-Fi, or needed plumbing repairs. But I adored that place. Grandpa would take me there every summer. I had the keys, and the deed had been surreptitiously transferred to me when Dad passed something that the rest of the family had never read the documentation about. It was mine. Something I had never mentioned since to them I was the black sheep, the burden, the child who never quite fit in. I arrived in the afternoon. The cabin was dusty, and the fireplace remained undisturbed. But it felt more like home than my parents' house ever did. I started a fire, unpacked my books, and breathed for the first time in months. No calls, no expectations, no snide remarks, just silence. Quietness with a purpose. The first few days were spent healing. I cooked, hiked, journaled, and eventually allowed myself to cry. I replayed that birthday supper 1,000 times in my imagination. And each time, I gained greater clarity. I had not been loved in that house. I had only been tolerated barely. I was done being tolerable. A week had gone before I checked my backup phone. I kept it off and only used it in emergencies. But curiosity got the best of me, and I turned it on just long enough to view the slew of messages and missed calls. Brielle. Where are you? Dad is freaking out. Mom. Please call me as soon as you can. It is urgent. Joel. We should chat. Seriously. Dad. Call me right now. I frowned. It was unexpected. So I did some investigating. I used my laptop to check a few items from a nearby secure hotspot, and the results made my blood run cold. Credit card payments have bounced, with late fees building up. Brielle's vehicle had been towed. A lien was issued on the family home in just 1 week, and every single bill bore my name on it, since they had been using my credit, my name, for years. They assumed I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, and that I owed them. When I was just 19, my father asked me to co-sign on things, stating that it would help me build credit. When Brielle lost her job 2 years ago, my mother surreptitiously leveraged my social status to create an emergency credit line. I hadn't noticed because I'd never checked. I trusted them. But as I departed, so did their safety net. And now they were desperate. But I wasn't prepared to pick up the phone just yet. Not until I realized the full scope of what they had done. Not until I understood everything. So I drove into town the following day to consult with a lawyer, and that's when I discovered something that caused me to sit down in the parking lot, clutching the folder in my hands and barely breathing. They didn't expect me to find out, and I intended to use it very carefully. The lawyer's name was Talia, and she was in her late 30s. She had piercing eyes and a no-nonsense voice that cut through pleasantries like a scalpel. I came into her office with a folder containing bank statements, co-signed agreements, and a numb feeling in my gut. She flipped through everything slowly, pausing every few pages, her face tightening with each new revelation. By the conclusion, she had closed the folder, leaned back in her chair and remarked, "Evan, this isn't just financial abuse, it's fraud. If you wanted to, you could file criminal charges." I blinked. Against my parents? She did not hesitate. Yes. And your sister too. All 3 of them used your identity. There's a paper trail a mile long. They forged signatures, opened multiple lines of credit in your name. And when she touched a document with a pen, they leveraged your name as collateral for the second mortgage on their house. It felt as if the floor had plummeted beneath me. Wait, what mortgage? I inquired. She opened and passed another file over the desk. 3 years ago, right after your grandfather passed, your father and mother filed paperwork claiming you agreed to co-sign the equity loan on the family home. They used the property value to take out $120,000. That's how they paid off Brielle's credit card debt, Joel's DUI lawyer apparently part of your mom's failed catering business. I slumped back in my chair, my hands quivering slightly. They forged my name? Talia nodded. They never thought you'd find out. As long as you kept paying your own bills and never questioned your credit score, it worked for them. And if you hadn't disappeared, they'd still be leeching off you. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before looking back down. So, what are my options? Talia folded her hands. You can report the fraud. That'll trigger a full investigation. Charges could follow. Or, if you'd rather avoid court, you could hit them where it really hurts financially. We freeze the accounts. Demand repayment. You have enough proof here to force them into default. And the house? She shot me a glare. Well, technically, since you never agreed to the mortgage, the loan is invalid. The bank will investigate, and if it's confirmed, the entire mortgage could be reversed. That house would be flagged, possibly repossessed. At the very least, they'll have to refinance it without you. It took me a while to speak. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm and controlled. I want to take back everything, every penny, every asset they stole. Not because I need it, but because they thought they were entitled to it. Talia simply nodded. Then we start today. So we did. First, she assisted me in filing a fraud report with the credit bureaus. We highlighted every account associated with my name. That meant that every card they used stopped working right away, and their phone bills, utilities, and even Brielle's auto insurance, which was paid for with my credit, froze within 48 hours. She then asked me to send an official demand letter, a notarized letter delivered via certified mail rather than a text or phone call. It detailed every transgression, including false paperwork, misused credit, and unlawful borrowing. It finished with a single sentence. You have 10 days to pay the bill or legal processes will begin. I did not anticipate them to answer straight away, but I was mistaken. The text appeared first. There are plenty of them. My mother begged for a chat. Brielle accused me of wrecking her life. My father's message was brief and smug. You're bluffing. We did what we needed to do for the family. I didn't respond. Then the voicemails began. Joel called, attempting to play peacemaker. Come on, kid. You're making this worse than it is. You've always been the responsible one. Just come back and we'll fix it as a family. But I was not going back. Not this time. I stayed at the cabin and let Talia manage everything from her office. Every day I felt lighter. Every day they became more desperate. Brielle posted a selfie of herself crying in front of her repossessed car. That afternoon, my mother left me a message in which her voice cracked halfway through and barely held together. Evan, please. Your father's blood pressure has been through the roof. We're behind on everything. We might lose the house. This isn't like you. You've always been the peacemaker. I nearly felt horrible. Almost. But then I remembered Mom sitting there quietly on my birthday while my father said the most vile thing a father can say to his child. Then came day 10. I was outside chopping wood when a car drove up the long gravel driveway to the cabin. At first I suspected it was a local delivery. However, when I stepped around the trees and saw who was getting out of the automobile, I froze. It was them. All of them. My father, my mother, Brielle, and even Joel are falling behind. They appeared older. Worn down. The stress of the previous week had aged them 5 years. My father's shirt was untucked. Brielle's makeup was smudged. And my mother looked like she hadn't slept in days. They stood there, crouched like a defensive line. My father stepped forward. We need to talk. I did not say anything. I simply leaned the axe against the log, cleaned my hands, and slowly walked up the porch. I opened the front door wide, and Talia stood immediately behind it. She clutched the packet in her palm and smiled. Talia did not move. She merely stood there, half shadowed by the doorway, clutching that heavy manila folder as if it were a weapon. In a way, it was. My father glanced, perplexed for a moment, then narrowed his eyes, as if he knew she wasn't just an acquaintance or a random visitor. He returned his gaze to me after looking back at the others. What is this? He asked, trying to keep his voice low and calm, as if he was still in control and we were going to have a logical family conversation over coffee. I didn't respond. I stepped aside and pointed to the small front porch table. Sit. If you want to talk, we talk here. All of you. They paused. Joel grumbled something under his breath, most likely about attorneys, but they ultimately mounted the steps and sat down. My mother's hands were shaking. Brielle did not even make eye contact. She continued pulling on a stray thread on her sleeve, as if she were attempting to disappear into it. Once everyone was seated, Talia emerged, calm as ever, and placed the folder on the table between us. She did not sit. She did not need to. I'm Talia Kovac, she said simply. I'm Mr. Dorenzo's legal representative. Before any of you speak, I'm going to remind you this conversation is being recorded, and that anything you say can be used in legal proceedings. Dad rolled his eyes and scoffed. Are you serious? You brought a lawyer to ambush your own family? Talia did not even blink. You ambushed him first, for the past 7 years. Brielle eventually looked up. This is crazy. You're blowing everything out of proportion. No, I replied quietly, going forward. You're just not used to hearing me speak without backing down. That silenced her. Talia opened the folder and took out a few sheets. Let's start with the forged mortgage documents, she replied, arranging the paperwork. Here's the signature you claimed Evan gave you, signed while he was attending a company retreat in another country. His passport confirms it. My mother opened her mouth, but Talia raised her hand. I'm not done. More pages were laid out. Credit card applications under my name. A car lease for Joel's son, secured by my credit score. Brielle's boutique loan was filed using my social security number. My father leaned closer, his voice rising. We're family. These weren't crimes. We're just trying to get by. Talia's smile was chilly. Intent doesn't negate illegality. And since Evan never consented to any of this, your justification won't hold up in court. Silence. A long, dense quiet. I leaned against the railing, crossing my arms. Do you know what it felt like to be told that my absence would make life easier for you on my birthday? Do you even realize what you said? What does it mean? My father glanced aside. Brielle remained mute. My mother opened her mouth. However, nothing came out. I left. I continued because I needed peace. Because for years, I've been the safety net, the backup plan, the financial crutch none of you even thanked. And the second I tried to breathe, you panicked. Because I was never a son to you, I was a tool, something useful, and when I stopped being useful, you called me selfish. Talia pulled out the final sheet. This is a formal notice. Evan is filing to freeze all joint accounts where his name is involved. He will also be pursuing compensation for damages to his credit, unauthorized debts and emotional distress. The total amount stands at roughly $194,000 not including legal fees. My father stood suddenly, knocking his chair back. You think you're going to take us down with this? You think a judge will side with you over your own family? That's when I moved in closer. I believe a judge will follow the evidence, I answered, my voice firm. And trust me, there's more. I have the emails, the texts, even voice memos. You're not as careful as you think. Joel murmured, this is nuts. We didn't intend for it to go this far. Talia glanced at her watch. You have 7 days to respond to the notice. If you choose to settle out of court, we're open to negotiation. If not, we proceed with full legal action. Brielle unexpectedly came forth. So that's it? You're just going to destroy us? Everything we've worked for? I laughed bitterly. Worked for? You used me. Everything you have was mine, built with my credit, paid for with my effort. I gave you, and you gave me what? A birthday toast that basically told me I was disposable. She appeared to be about to dispute, but instead burst into tears. My mother stretched out to me, and for a short second her eyes softened. Evan, please. We're family. I stared at her hand. You were my family, I murmured before backing away. They stood there in silence, staring at me as if they didn't recognize who I was anymore, as if I had transformed into someone unrecognizable. Maybe I did. Or perhaps they were now seeing the side of me that I had hidden for years. The version that refused to beg for affection and did not flinch when pushed. The sun was starting to set behind the trees, sending long shadows across the porch. Talia returned the folder to her briefcase and looked at me. Are we done here? I nodded. She turned to face them. I suggest you get a lawyer. They stood one by one and shuffled back to their cars. No more shouting. No more bravado. Just silence. The automobile door slammed. The engine began. Then they were gone. But it wasn't over. Not even close. They did not react within the 7 days that Talia allotted them. Not with a settlement. Not with a counteroffer. Not even with an apology. Just more stillness. When I was younger, I was the one tiptoeing around their mood swings, anxious to mend things before they got worse. But suddenly I wasn't the one waiting. Talia filed her case on Monday morning. I signed each page in a peaceful manner, feeling lighter with each stroke of the pen. Fraud. Identity theft. Financial losses. Emotional anguish. We weren't playing gently anymore. That same week, Brielle wrote a mysterious statement on social media about treachery and family members becoming strangers. Friends of hers responded with heart and sad emojis. I did not respond. I didn't explain since I didn't feel obligated to do so. By the next month, the repercussions had struck hard. First, the court identified the fake mortgage. My father tried to explain that it was a family arrangement, but Talia provided actual receipts. Bank transfers. Communications are time-stamped. My travel records show that I wasn't even in the country when I reportedly signed. The judge did not even blink. The loan was found invalid. The house was not yet repossessed, but the bank halted all activity related to it. including refinancing options. This meant that late payments began to accumulate, interest skyrocketed, and because their finances were entangled with the credit lines under my name, their entire financial web began to unravel quickly. Brielle's boutique closed quietly, with no announcement. That "closed for renovations" sign emerged one day and did not disappear. Joel's automobile, which I had mistakenly co-signed for, was repossessed 2 months later after he missed 2 consecutive payments. He left a furious voicemail, calling me ungrateful and warned me that karma always comes around. I erased it without hearing the end. My mother called once. Only once. She did not beg. She did not yell. She just stated, "You've made your point. We're drowning." And I gently said, "No. I've only just started cleaning up the mess you made." The litigation took almost a year to resolve. They delayed their feet, tried to postpone hearings, claimed emotional distress, and even attempted to gaslight the story in court by claiming I was unstable, harboring a grudge, or wanting vengeance. But Talia was unrelenting, professional, precise. By the time the final hearing arrived, the judge had found in my favor on all counts. They were sentenced to pay reparations of $198,000. They lost access to all accounts under my name. My credit was cleaned of all bogus charges. Brielle was even fined for falsifying loan applications, but it did not result in criminal charges since I agreed not to pursue them. That was the only compromise I made. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed peace. I used a portion of the compensation to rebuild my credit and invest in my future. What about the rest? I used it to remodel the cabin. It took 6 months, but by the end, the place was unrecognizable. The plumbing was upgraded. Solar panels on the roof. A comfortable office area for remote work. My grandfather had long wanted to finish the stone chimney in his fireplace. It became my home. Not just a place to run, but also a place to live. One afternoon, as I was collecting firewood, a car pulled into the driveway again. I nearly ignored it. Visitors were few, and I preferred it that way. But something prompted me to investigate. It was Brielle. Alone. She came out with faded jeans and a hoodie that was too large for her. No makeup, no performance. It's just her. She seemed smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just humbled. She did not come close. She stood by the car, hands hidden in her sleeves. "I'm not here to fight," she explained. I wanted to see where you went. What you chose instead of us." I nodded gently, and she took in the trees, the porch, and the peaceful air. "It's beautiful," she replied quietly. "I get it now." I did not speak. "I was awful to you," she went on. "We all were. I think we wanted you to be the responsible one because none of us were ready to grow up. And when you finally quit supporting us, we fell because we'd never learned to stand on our own." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that an apology?" She met my gaze. "It's an attempt. I don't expect forgiveness. I just thought, if you ever wondered whether we regretted it, we do. Or at least I do." I believed her. Not because her voice wavered or she appeared exhausted, but because there was no pleading, manipulation, or rebuttal, just the calm truth. I nodded once. "I appreciate you coming all the way here to say it." She lingered, possibly expecting more, perhaps hoping for something different. But I did not offer it. After a time, she gave a tiny smile, turned, and returned to the car. As the engine faded into the distance, I returned to the cabin, a cool wind brushing over my cheeks. And for the first time in years, I felt liberated. Not simply from debt. Not only from the house. But from the responsibility of being a decent son. The silent fixer. The unseen crutch. I'd confronted them. Make them aware. Fought back. And I didn't have to yell or break down to accomplish it. I only needed to move away to vanish. And when I did, they finally noticed me. My mom let her new husband kick me out on my 18th birthday. But the house they stole was secretly mine all along. Now I'm taking it back. My name is Kevin, and I am 19 years old. I am now studying computer engineering at a state college in Arizona. I never expected to share my life story here, but after everything that has happened in the last several months, I decided someone could benefit from my experience. Warning. This is going to be a long one. I grew up in what I'd call a middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix, one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions where all of the houses look similar but have enough variances to prevent you from accidentally walking into your neighbor's home. Our house had 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, a decent backyard, and a garage that my father transformed into a workshop. Nothing extravagant. But it was home. Speaking of my father, he was the best person I knew. He worked as an electrical engineer at a local aerospace business, coached my little baseball team, and showed me how to build my first computer when I was 8. He was not flawless. Dude couldn't cook to save his life and had an odd love with 80s metal bands, but he was always there for me until he wasn't. My father died of a huge heart attack when I was 10. He was only 38 years old, had no warning indications, no family history, and was suddenly gone. One day, we were playing catch in the backyard. The next day, Mom tells me he'll never come home. That kind of alters you, especially as a child. After Dad died, it was just me and my mother Sandra, for about 2 years. She was fine, I suppose. She worked as an office manager at a dental business and earned approximately $55,000 per year. We were not wealthy, but Dad's life insurance and job benefits kept us comfortable. Mom was not particularly warm or friendly before Dad died, but she became colder thereafter, as if she regretted having to raise me alone. Then Rick joined the picture. Mom met him at a networking event for local businesses. He claimed to be an entrepreneur with several businesses and investment prospects. Red flags are everywhere, right? But Mom was unable or unwilling to see it. They dated for a whole 6 months before marrying. I was 13 at the time, awkward as hell, and not delighted with this random person suddenly being my new father. Rick came into our house with his 15-year-old daughter Tessa, who was 2 years older than me. She was a complete disaster from the start, taking my belongings, eating my meals, making messes all over the place, and blaming me. Using my computer without authorization and downloading viruses. And of course Mom and Rick always supported her. Kevin, don't be so sensitive. Kevin, you need to share with your sister. Kevin, stop exaggerating. Kevin, you need to be more understanding. It felt like someone had said it before. Meanwhile, Tessa smirked at me behind their backs, confident that she could get away with anything. Rick was worse in multiple ways. He drove a leased BMW, which he could barely afford. I later discovered that he was always late on payments, wore false designer clothes, and enjoyed bragging about his connections and transactions that never materialized. He'd return home with fancy devices or watches, flaunt them for a few weeks, and then inexplicably vanish when he couldn't make his credit card payments. In addition, he was incredibly lazy. Mom would go for work at 7:30 in the morning, while Rick would sleep until noon. He claimed to work from home, but much of his time was spent watching ESPN and making the rare business call, which was usually him trying to recruit another poor sucker into one of his pyramid schemes. By the time I was 14, I realized no one in the house was watching out for me. So I began looking out for myself. When I turned 15, I studied hard, kept my head down, and started working part-time at a local computer repair company. Mr. Singh, the owner, was a kind guy who taught me some essential skills. I began off at $10 an hour just cleaning the shop and doing basic inventory, but as I learned more, I was promoted to $12, then $15 an hour for genuine repair work. I saved nearly everything I earned. I had an old ammo box that used to be my grandfather's, and I kept my money hidden in the crawl space above my closet where Tessa couldn't find it. By the time I graduated from high school, I had saved over $8,000. It was not a fortune, but it was money I had earned. I also had a close group of buddies named Adam, Noah, and Luke. We were the kind of nerdy men that built gaming PCs and spent weekends playing D&D instead of going to parties. Adam's living arrangement was really good. His parents were both teachers, and really mellow. Noah lived with his mother, who worked nights as a nurse, thus his home was frequently empty. Luke had the strictest parents, but they still respected him. All three of them knew my home life was bad, but I tried not to whine too much. Fast forward to my 18th birthday on October 22nd last year. It was a Thursday, so I had my programming fundamentals class at the community college in the morning. My senior year, I took dual enrollment, traditional high school classes, and worked at a computer shop. There is nothing extraordinary planned. My friends had proposed getting pizza that weekend to celebrate, but on the actual day, I simply wanted to go home and relax. I received a few "Happy Day Bro" texts throughout the day, a candy bar from Mr. Singh, and, oddly enough, an actual birthday card from Mrs. Alvarez, our 70-something neighbor who had been next door since before I was born. She'd always been kind to me, especially after Dad died. I did not have a car when I got off the bus that evening at 6:30 p.m. Rick had persuaded Mom that getting me a car would spoil me. I was actually in a good mood. Perhaps there would be a store-bought cake or something at home. Maybe Mom remembers. As I came closer, our house, I noticed Rick standing on the driveway next to his prized BMW. He was holding my old blue duffel bag, which my father and I used to carry on camping trips, and he had the most punchable smirk. No hello, and no happy birthday. He merely tossed my luggage on the concrete driveway and said, "Time's up, kid." You're 18, which means you're no longer my problem. Get the hell out of my house. I stood there absolutely stunned, as if my brain couldn't grasp what was happening. What are you talking about? I finally asked. Rick laughed. You're an adult now, adults don't live rent-free. Your mom and I decided it's time for you to move out and experience the real world. But this is my mom's house. Where am I supposed to go? I muttered, still not understanding what was going on. Rick's laugh became louder and meaner. Your mom's house? That's cute. Ask her yourself if you don't believe me. Then I heard Tessa shouting from her bedroom window. Mom already knows. She's totally fine with it. You're out, loser. She was filming the entire episode on her phone, most likely for her idiotic TikTok, where she pretended her life was so hard. I could not believe what was happening. My legs felt weak, and I experienced a strange buzzing in my ears. With shaky hands, I took out my phone and contacted my mother. She was still at work. The dentist office remained open late on Thursdays. She responded after 5 rings. Mom, I whispered, attempting to keep my voice steady. Rick just kicked me out. He threw my stuff on the driveway. There was a pause. Then she simply stated, I know, Kevin. We discussed this. You're an adult now. My heart felt like it had stopped. You agreed to this? To throw me out on my birthday with no warning? She sighed, as if I was overly dramatic. Don't use that language with me. Rick's right. You need to grow up and be a man. We've carried you long enough. Carried me? I'd been working since I was 15, paying for my own clothes and phone. I'd even provided them $300 per month in rent for the last year, as Rick asked, to teach me responsibility. That was more than $3,600 taken from me to live in a house where I had grown up my entire life. It's my birthday today, I muttered, my voice barely audible. I know. Consider this your chance to finally become independent. Happy birthday. Then she hung up. I stood there in disbelief, staring at my duffel bag, which evidently contained all of my stuff that Rick had determined I could keep. I opened it right there on the driveway, and inside were some clothing, albeit not all of mine. My laptop, luckily, some basic toiletries, and a few strange books. There are no photographs of Dad, none of my gaming accessories, none of my tools from the workshop. You've got 10 minutes to get anything else you absolutely need, Rick remarked, inspecting his counterfeit Rolex. Then I'm changing the locks. I felt numb as I walked into my childhood house. Tessa was sitting on the stairs, still recording me, with that dumb sneer on her face. "Ah, is little Kevin going to cry?" she teased. I ignored her and walked directly to my room. I reached up into the crawl area for my ammo box of savings, as well as my backup hard drive containing all of my essential information, and a photo book of Dad and me. Then I remembered my father's watch, the one decent thing he owned. A vintage Seiko that his father had given him. It was in my desk drawer. But it wasn't. Looking for this? Tessa stood in my doorway, dangling Dad's watch. Rick pawned it last week, said since you were leaving anyway, you wouldn't need it. Something in me broke at that point. I sprang at her, not intending to hurt her, only to get the watch, but she jumped back laughing. I'm kidding. God, you're so easy to mess with. Rick sold it months ago. I can't recall much after that. I somehow made it back outdoors with my few belongings. Mrs. Alvarez watched from her porch, her expression filled with concern. I must have looked like a total mess. Kevin? She shouted out. Is everything okay, mijo? I couldn't even respond to her. I simply shook my head and began walking, with no goal in mind. My hands were so shaky that I couldn't even text Adam to ask if I could crash at his apartment that night. I slept on Adam's couch trying to make sense of how my life had disintegrated in a matter of hours. Adam's family graciously allowed me to stay the first night, although their apartment was small, with just 2 bedrooms for Adam, his parents, and his younger sister. His mother set up the couch for me with clean sheets and even gave me a new toothbrush, but I knew this wasn't a long-term fix. I went to school the next morning in the identical clothing I had worn the day before. I tried to act normal, but I was a complete wreck on the inside. During lunch I sat with my pals and eventually broke down, telling them everything. Dude, that's messed up, Noah said. They can't just throw you out like that. Actually, they legally can, Luke added. Luke's father was a paralegal, so he had some legal knowledge. Not helping, Ty, Adam replied, giving him a glare. Sorry, just saying, Luke murmured. After school I went to work at the computer shop. Mr. Singh looked at me and knew something was amiss. What happened? He questioned with his strong Indian accent. You look like hell warmed over. I gave him the shortened version. He listened without interrupting and then disappeared into his office. He returned with a protein snack and a can of Coke. Eat. he replied. Then we spoke. After my shift, Mr. Singh offered to let me remain in the shop's storage room temporarily. There's a cot in there from when my nephew worked here, he told me. Not comfortable, but better than the street. I was so grateful that I almost sobbed again. But when I was trying to thank him, I remembered something or someone I hadn't considered before. My father's brother, Uncle Thomas. We weren't really close. He lived approximately 40 miles away in Tempe, and worked insane hours as a construction supervisor. But he was always nice to me, sending me birthday cards with $50 and occasionally checking in. I hadn't seen him for almost a year. Rick was always making excuses when Uncle Thomas came to visit, most likely because he knew Uncle Thomas could see straight through him. I thanked Mr. Singh but said I wanted to try one more thing before accepting his offer. I visited McDonald's to use their free Wi-Fi. My phone plan had limited data, so I called Uncle Thomas. I half anticipated to receive voicemail, given that it was around 6 p.m. and he was most likely still on the job site. Instead, he focused on the second ring. "Kevin? Is everything okay?" He could undoubtedly tell there was something wrong by the tone of my voice. I attempted to sound casual but broke down around 10 seconds in. I informed him about being kicked out, my mother's reaction, and Dad's watch being sold. There was a moment of stillness. He continued. "Text me your location. I'm coming to get you right now." An hour later, his dusty F-150 arrived outside McDonald's. When he saw me with my duffel bag, his cheeks became an unusual shade of red. "Get in," he said. "But first, I'm making a call." I hopped into his truck and saw him call my mother on speakerphone. "Sandra, it's Thomas. I've got Kevin with me. He tells me Rick kicked him out yesterday, and you went along with it. What the hell is going on?" My mother's voice came over as guarded and furious. "This is between me, Rick and Kevin. It's not your business, Thomas." Uncle Thomas laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Not my business? My brother's son is homeless on his 18th birthday, and it's not my business? Let me tell you something, Sandra. You're going to regret this. Mark my words." "Is that a threat?" she demanded. "No, it's a promise," he said. Calmly. "You and that leech you married have no idea what's coming. I hope that house is worth losing your son over." He hung up and turned to me. "Kevin, there's some stuff you need to know about that house, but first, let's get you settled at my place." Uncle Thomas's house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home that he had mostly restored himself. He lived there with his wife Rachel, a nurse, and his 14-year-old son Mason, who was infatuated with basketball. They instantly emptied up their home office for me and treated me as if I were family rather than a burden. That night, after dinner, real home-cooked food, not the takeout my mom and Rick often ordered, Uncle Thomas sat me down with a Coke. I'd never seen him seem this serious. "Kevin, did you know your grandfather owned that house free and clear, and that when he died, he left it specifically to you?" I almost choked on my soda. "What are you talking about? That house is Mom's, isn't it?" Uncle Tom shook his head. "Your grandfather and your dad's father bought that house back in the 1990s for about $120,000. When he got sick, he updated his will. He left cash to your dad and me, but the house was specifically left to you, his only grandchild." He stood up and went to his desk, taking out a folder containing yellowed papers. "Here's a copy of the will. I kept one because I never fully trusted your mom. Especially after she rushed to marry that con artist Rick." As I read through the legal wording, my palms shook again. But for a different reason. There it was in black and white. My primary residence at 1422 Oakwood Drive will be left to my grandson, Kevin Allen Mitchell. "But how?" I stammered. "How could they live there if it's mine?" "You were 11 years old when Grandpa died," Uncle Thomas explained. "Too young to own property. The will specified that your parents would act as trustees until you turned 18. When your dad died a year later, your mom became the sole trustee. She was supposed to transfer everything to you on your 18th birthday." My mind was whirling. "Instead, they kicked me out of my own house." Uncle Thomas nodded grimly. "That's not all. I bet they've been renting out the basement apartment for cash and pocketing the money that was supposed to go into a trust for you." He was correct. About 2 years after Rick moved in, they converted the basement into a separate apartment and rented it out to a college student named Jake for $900 per month. I always assumed it was their house and money. "So, what do we do?" I inquired, rage replacing shock. "First, we document everything," Uncle Thomas stated. "Then we talk to my friend Leo. He's the best real estate attorney in the state." Just then, Aunt Rachel entered with a small chocolate cake and a solitary candle. "I know it's a day late, but everyone deserves a birthday cake," she added cheerfully. "It was a simple thing. Yet I had to hold back tears. My mother couldn't be bothered to remember my birthday, but my aunt made me feel important. As I blew out the flame, Mason inquired, "Did you make a wish?" I nodded. "Yeah, I did." "Don't tell us what it was," Aunt Rachel urged. "Or it won't come true." But internally, I understood exactly what I had prayed for. Justice. That night, in the converted office, with new linens on a pull-out couch, I finally broke down. All of the emotions I had been suppressing, including shock, betrayal, wrath, and fear, came spilling out. I buried my face in the pillow so no one could hear me sobbing like a small child. I sobbed for the house I'd lost, for my father who wasn't there to defend me, for years of putting up with Rick and Tessa's nonsense, and for my mother's decision to prioritize them above me. I cried till I was exhausted and then fell asleep. The following morning, I awoke to the fragrance of pancakes and the sound of Mason shooting hoops in the driveway. For a minute, I forgot what had happened. Then everything came rushing back. But something was different. The anguish of yesterday has been replaced by something more powerful. Determination. I wasn't going to just get through this. I was prepared to fight back. Uncle Thomas explained the strategy over breakfast. "I called Leo last night after you went to bed. He can see us at 11 o'clock. In the meantime, I want you to write down everything you can remember about the basement apartment when they renovated it. How much they've been charging for rent, everything." "I can do better than that," I responded, taking out my phone. "I've got texts from Rick about the rent payments." Uncle Thomas grinned. "That's my nephew, always thinking ahead." Leo Goldstein, Uncle Thomas's attorney acquaintance, operated from a restored Victorian mansion downtown. His office was on the second story, with dark wood paneling and books all over. He looked younger than I expected, possibly in his mid-40s, with a clean beard and glasses that resembled those of a college professor. He listened intently while I recounted everything, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Uncle Thomas provided some information on my grandfather and the will. When we were finished, Leo leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen on the pad. "Based on these documents," he informed me, "the house is unquestionably yours, Kevin. Your mother had a fiduciary duty to transfer the property to you when you turned 18. Not only did she fail to do that, but she and her husband illegally evicted you from your own property." "So I can just go back and kick them out?" I was wondering. Leo smiled, but it was not a joyful one. "We could do that, or we could build a stronger case and really make them pay for what they've done." He stated that if we could prove they had been collecting rental income from the property without putting it in trust for me, we could sue for both misuse of funds and wrongful eviction of a minor. Because I was kicked out at 6:30 p.m. on my birthday, when I was technically still 17 years old according to my birth certificate, which said I was born at 9:17 p.m., they faced extra legal issues. "Here's what we're going to do," Leo explained, leaning forward. "First, we need to establish a paper trail. Kevin, you mentioned texts about the rental income?" I browsed through my phone and discovered several texts from Rick throughout the last year. "Remind Jake that rent is due tomorrow. $900 in cash only. Jake is late again with the rent. Tell him to pay up or find another spot." I received the $900 from Jake. I am going to utilize it to pay for the yacht. Leo raised his brow at the final one. "Rick has a boat?" "A small pontoon boat he bought last summer," I explained. "Said it was an investment opportunity for lake tours or something. He used it like twice, then kept it parked in our driveway." "Perfect," Leo remarked, taking additional notes. "Now we need to get statements from witnesses. Your friend Adam, who took you in that first night. The tenant Jake. Maybe some neighbors who saw you being kicked out." "Mrs. Alvarez was outside when it happened," I recalled. "And I think she called my mom about it." "Excellent. Here's my plan. I'll file an emergency petition with the court to establish your ownership rights and get a temporary restraining order against your mother and Rick to prevent them from selling or further encumbering the property. Then we'll build our case for financial restitution." Over the next 2 weeks, we collected evidence and statements. Adam and his parents made sworn statements about how I walked up at their door with only a duffel bag. Luke's father assisted us with part of the paperwork because he was familiar with the judicial system. We even reached out to Jake, the downstairs resident. He was a 22-year-old community college student who was completely unaware of the ownership status. He was horrified to learn what had happened. "Dude, that's so messed up," he informed me when we met at a Starbucks near school. "I had no clue it was your house. Rick always acted like he was doing me a favor by renting to me." Jake sent us copies of all of his rental agreements and payment records, which totaled $900 every month for over 3 years. Over $32,000 should have gone to me. He also informed us that Rick had suddenly wanted cash exclusively for payments, which Leo considered a major red flag. He's trying to hide the income, Leo explained. This just gets better and better for our case. Mrs. Alvarez, our elderly neighbor, was probably the most crucial witness. She had observed everything from her front porch and even photographed it with her phone because she believed something wasn't right. I saw that awful man throw your bag out, she told me, her accent thick but her memory sharp. I wanted to help, but I didn't know what to do. I called your mother but she never called back. I've been worried sick about you, mijo. The photo she had taken plainly showed Rick standing over me, my duffel bag on the ground, and a timestamp of 6:30 p.m. on October 22nd, proving that I was still legally a child when they booted me out. Leo also requested a title search for the residence, which revealed something startling. Rick took out a $60,000 home equity line of credit barely 6 months after marrying my mother. They had no legal right to do this, because the house was not theirs to borrow against. This is fraud, Leo stated plainly as he showed us the documentation. They forged documents to secure that loan. The bank should have caught this. But they probably just saw that your mom was living there and assumed she owned it. By mid-November, we were prepared. Leo filed files with the court and issued official notices to my mother and Rick. The judge assigned to our case, Judge Bennett, granted an emergency hearing based on proof of a minor's wrongful removal. Now we wait, Leo explained. But not for long. 3 days after the legal warnings arrived, my phone flooded with texts and phone calls from my mother. I disregarded them all, per Leo's instructions. Then Rick made threats. You ungrateful little... After all we've done for you. I blocked his phone number. Tessa, my stepsister, also got in on the act, writing on Instagram about how I was attempting to take their house and how psychotic I was. My real friends knew better and supported me, but it still stung to see the lies. A week later, we had our first court date. I wore a suit that Uncle Thomas helped me buy, but my mother arrived in an exquisite outfit that I knew she couldn't afford. Rick sported a phony Rolex and a smug grin that faded when our lawyer presented the evidence. Your Honor, Leo responded. Not only did the defendants fail to transfer the property as required by the will, they illegally evicted the rightful owner who was still a minor at the time of eviction and have been collecting rental income without accounting for those funds. My mother's counsel, a nervous-looking man who kept dropping his papers, attempted to explain that they had utilized the rental revenue for my benefit to cover food, clothing, and other costs. Leo was prepared for this. We have receipts showing that Kevin purchased his own clothes, paid for his own phone, and even paid $300 monthly rent to the defendants, essentially paying them to live in a house he already owned. The judge's countenance darkened with each piece of evidence. By the end of the session, she had given a temporary order. My mom and Rick were unable to collect any additional rent from Jake, make any improvements to the property, and were had to furnish complete financial records within 30 days. Outside the courts, my mother attempted to approach me. Kevin, please. You have to understand we were just trying to prepare you for the real world. I stared her directly in the eyes. The real world? In the real world, people who steal and lie go to jail. Consider this your preparation. Rick approached me, fists clenched, but Uncle Thomas stepped in between us. Not a smart move, he said. Rick quickly backed down. Uncle Thomas weighed 50 pounds and had 4 inches of muscle. As they went away, I felt both sad and satisfied. This was only the beginning. Over the next month, more unpleasant revelations emerged. The financial discovery process revealed that my mother and Rick had not only taken up a $60,000 home equity line of credit, but also maxed it out. Rick had spent the money on failed business projects, vacations to Cancun, and BMW payments. Leo was really enraged. This is textbook fraud, I heard him say. They forged documents to secure that loan. We're adding this to our complaint. Meanwhile, I continued to focus on school and my job at the computer repair company, which had offered me more hours. Uncle Thomas and Aunt Rachel requested that I stay with them rent-free until everything was settled. Family doesn't charge family, Uncle Thomas simply stated when I offered to pay something. Mason was actually rather relaxed about his cousin suddenly staying with them. He even cleared out half of his wardrobe to make room for my things and encouraged me to join his pals for weekend basketball games. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was better than I had anticipated. The case moved very rapidly when the loan fraud was exposed. We had another hearing in early December, during which the judge appointed a receiver to manage the property and funds until a final decision was reached. That's when everything went horribly wrong. The receiver learned Rick had taken out a second mortgage for $25,000 barely a week after they kicked me out. That money had already gone, largely to online gambling sites. Rick lost it in court when this came up, yelling about his rights and calling me every term in the book. The judge ordered him removed and detained in contempt. As Christmas neared, I received an unexpected guest at Uncle Thomas's house. Jake, the basement tenant, who appeared nervous. "Your mom and Rick told me I have to pay them in cash from now on," he recalled. "They said if I told anyone, they'd evict me immediately." We quickly communicated this to Leo and the receiver. The judge issued a restraining order, preventing my mother and Rick from even approaching the property without court authorization. By this point, word of our case had gone across the neighborhood and my former high school. People I barely knew messaged me with stories about Rick's frauds and my mother's falsehoods. Former acquaintances of my mother came forward with texts in which she boasted about living the good life with Kevin's inheritance. One of my father's former co-workers even contacted me to inform me that Rick attempted to sell him investment opportunities, using my father's name as a reference shortly after his death. The guy had seen through it and cut contact. But he thought I should know. It was like seeing a house of cards fall in slow motion. Christmas with Uncle Thomas's family was not like the stressful, materialistic holidays with Mom and Rick. We bought a real tree, made homemade ornaments with Mason, and exchanged simple but heartfelt gifts. Aunt Rachel made homemade tamales using her grandmother's recipe, and Uncle Thomas went us to volunteer at a local shelter on Christmas Eve. For New Year's, my friends came over for a gaming night. As the clock struck midnight and we all exclaimed, "Happy New Year," I realized I was truly happy. Regardless of what had transpired, I had people who truly cared about me. The final hearing was scheduled for January 15th, almost precisely 3 months after they kicked me out. In the weeks running up to it, my mother undertook a desperate push to persuade me to withdraw the case. She left heartfelt voicemails describing how Rick had manipulated her. She even turned up at my workplace, raising such a commotion that Mr. Singh had to contact security. She attempted to ambush me after class at college, pleading for 5 minutes to explain. Rick took a different strategy. He had his brother, who turned out to be a low-level pot dealer rather than the investment banker Rick had always claimed, approach me outside school with an offer of $10,000 in cash to drop everything. I recorded the exchange and included it in our proof. Tessa continued her social media campaign, publishing manipulated screenshots of conversations and alleging I was plotting to destroy the family out of jealousy. She even launched a GoFundMe page, stating they were going to be destitute because of me, but it only got about $200 from naive individuals. Throughout it all, I remained focused on school and job. My grades improved dramatically now that I was no longer living in a poisonous environment. Mr. Singh offered me a promotion to assistant manager once I completed my associate's degree. I even considered applying to Arizona State's computer science program in the fall. Uncle Thomas met with me the day before the final hearing. "Kevin, I want you to be prepared for tomorrow," stated the teacher. "No matter what the judge decides, you've already won. You stood up for yourself. You discovered the truth, and you've built a new life. I'm proud of you, and your dad would be too." I nodded, my throat thick with emotion. "I know. I just want it to be over." "It will be," he pledged. "One way or another." The next morning as we prepared to go for court, I noticed Aunt Rachel putting together a tiny box. "What's that?" I inquired. She smiled. "Just a little something for after. Win or lose, we're celebrating you today." Uncle Thomas was unusually silent while driving to the courthouse. Finally he said, "Whatever happens in there, remember that you have a home with us for as long as you need it. No rush, no pressure. Your family." I nodded, too nervous to say. But inside I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years, the comfort of knowing I genuinely belonged somewhere. The courtroom was busier than I expected. Mr. Singh, Mrs. Alvarez, Jake, Adam, Noah, and Luke were all present. My mother Rick and Tessa sat in the front row, dressed appropriately for church. Judge Bennett brought the court to order. She was a stern-faced woman in her 60s, reading spectacles perched on the tip of her nose. She started by summarizing the case. "This court has reviewed extensive evidence regarding the ownership of the property at 1422 Oakwood Drive, the actions of the trustees, Sandra and Gregory Lawson, and the circumstances surrounding the eviction of Kevin Mitchell on October 22 of last year." She paused, looking directly at my mother and Rick through her glasses. "The evidence of financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty in this case is some of the most egregious this court has seen. Not only did the trustees fail to transfer the property as required by the will of Harold Mitchell, but they actively worked to conceal the rightful ownership from the beneficiary, misappropriated rental income, fraudulently encumbered the property, and then evicted the rightful owner, while he was still a legal minor. My mother was already weeping. Rick sat stone-faced. Tessa was furiously texting, most likely updating her fans. Therefore, this court rules as follows, Judge Bennett went on. Full and clear title to the property at 1422 Oakwood Drive is hereby transferred to Kevin Allen Mitchell, effective immediately. All liens and encumbrances placed on the property by the defendants are deemed fraudulent and void. Uncle Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder and gave me a comforting squeeze. Furthermore, the judge said, the defendants, Sandra and Gregory Lawson, are ordered to pay restitution to Kevin Mitchell in the amount of $57,400, representing the misappropriated rental income and illegal rent payments collected from the plaintiff. She was not done. The court additionally imposes $25,000 in punitive penalties for illegally evicting a youngster. Finally, this court has referred the evidence of loan fraud to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. The gavel crashed down with a thud that echoed throughout the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, my mother burst into tears and rushed toward me. Kevin, please, we have nowhere to go, I'm still your mother. I paused and looked at her for a moment. I nearly felt bad for her. Almost. You stopped being my mother the moment you chose him over me, I replied softly. You threw me out of my house on my birthday without a second thought. Now you know how it feels. Rick attempted to be tough one final time. You think you've won? This isn't over, you little. Leo cut him off. Actually, it is over. And every word out of your mouth just increases the likelihood of criminal charges. I suggest you stop talking. 3 days later, I stood on my front lawn, watching sheriff's deputies monitor my mother and Rick as they loaded their stuff into a U-Haul truck. Tessa was crying profusely while filming herself on social media about being homeless. She was moving in with her real mother, who owned a wonderful condo downtown. My mother made one final plea as she carried out her last box. Kevin, you can't do this to your own mother. Where are we supposed to go? I stared at her gently. You should have thought about that before you kicked out your son. I was wondering the same thing 3 months ago. As they drove away, Uncle Thomas placed his hand on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. For the first time in a long time, I actually am. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom at home. I decided to continue renting the basement to Jake at a reasonable rate. I used some of the damage money to complete the home renovations that Rick had been putting off for years. I also established a minor scholarship at my former high school in my grandfather's name. It wasn't much, $1,000 per year, but it would help someone in need. Last I heard, my mother and Rick were living in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. Rick is facing charges for loan fraud, and my mother's dental office dismissed her after learning about the matter. Sometimes I feel a tinge of guilt, but then I remember standing on that driveway with nothing but a duffel bag for my birthday. My mother's harsh voice said, "You need to grow up," before hanging up on me. And I recall that they did this to themselves. The house is mine. It always was. My life is now totally complete. So, was I an asshole for reclaiming what was legally mine while leaving my mother and stepfather with nothing? I honestly don't care either way. Some things have to be taught the hard way. A lot of individuals are curious about my future plans. I plan to finish my degree, continue working part-time, and eventually sell the house to buy something with fewer terrible memories. But now it feels lovely to sleep under my own roof. Nobody can steal it from me. On Christmas Eve, my mom kicked us out, saying no room. Now, Grandma called me back and did something that shook the whole family. Go home. There's no room for you. She didn't whisper it. She didn't pull me aside. She said it loud, sharp, and ice cold, right in front of my 6-year-old son. That was my mother's welcome when we showed up for the family Christmas party 2 years ago. I stood there frozen, my son's smile faded. And we walked away humiliated. But the story didn't end there. My grandmother found out. She called me, demanded I come back. What happened after that flipped the entire family upside down. And made my parents wish they'd never opened that door. Hello everyone. My name is Daniel. I am 35 years old and work as a branch manager for a company that specializes in auto rentals and used cars in Denver, Colorado. This isn't the work I envisioned as a child, but it provides me with a steady income and the freedom to care for my family members. I live with my wife, Sophie, and our 8-year-old son Mason in Thornton, a pleasant suburb about 10 minutes from the office. Every morning, I hear Mason giggling in the room next door. He is usually thrilled to tell me about his weird dreams. Sophie is generally busy in the kitchen preparing breakfast, occasionally reminding me not to forget my phone before I go. These simple moments remind me that true happiness does not need to be complicated. Still, there are times when I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, haunted by recollections of the Christmas party in 2023. Some nights I sit up in bed, my shirt soaking, knowing deep down that I still can't get rid of the pictures of my parents and younger brother. My narrative begins on a weekend evening in December, only a few days before Christmas. Our family had just concluded a lovely dinner of grilled pork and mashed potatoes, Mason's favorite. While Sophie was cleaning the table and Mason was playing with his Legos in the living room, my phone rang. When the name Grandma Helen appeared on the screen, my heart warmed. I picked up straight away. She's the one person in my family who has ever actually loved me. My grandmother Helen is 78 years old, but remains healthy and sharp. She was the only one in the family who ever stood up for me, especially because my parents were always favoring Nathan, my younger brother. After asking a few pleasant questions about Mason, she got to the point of her call. She informed me that this year's Christmas would be hosted at her large house in Boulder, and she hoped that my family would be present. The instant she uttered that, a calm fear crept into my heart. After more than a year of avoiding them, the notion of seeing my parents and Nathan again made my throat clench. Still, I didn't want to disappoint her, so I agreed. I answered her, "Yes, I'll bring Sophie and Mason." But when I hung up, my mind raced with 100 other ideas. I didn't want to upset her, but the thought of attending that party made me nervous. Sophie strolled in from the kitchen as I was still lost in contemplation after the phone talk with Grandma. She noticed the anxious look on my face and inquired, "What's wrong? You don't look okay." I pulled her into a chair and informed her of Grandma's invitation. Sophie looked at me, concerned, and asked, "Do you want to go? I know you don't feel comfortable seeing them again." I sighed deeply and replied, "I don't want to disappoint Grandma. She's the only family member who's ever truly loved me." Sophie gently placed her hand on me and squeezed lightly. She said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Hearing such remarks from her made me feel grateful, and even blessed. I want a woman that understands me and constantly supports me. After nearly 2 minutes of silence, I informed her, "We'll go to Grandma's party. We can't keep running from this." And more importantly, she invited us. Just as I finished speaking, Mason, who was seated nearby, burst out in enthusiasm. He was covertly listening to everything while building his Legos. His delight reminded me of all the times he'd accompanied us on visits to my grandmother. Mason adored Grandma Helen, despite having only seen her a few times. He recommended we prepare a greeting card for her and even asked Sophie if she might bake something for her. Grandma had enjoyed one of Sophie's cakes when we visited approximately 3 months prior. Sophie had suggested Mason make cards for both of his grandparents. Mason refused. He stated, "Grandma and Grandpa don't like me. They only care about Adrian, so I'm not making them cards." Hearing those remarks from my son struck me deeply. I was not sad because he did not love my parents. I was upset because Adrian and Nathan threw a shade over my son, preventing him from experiencing their love. Adrian is the son of Nathan, my younger brother. Nathan had always been my parents' favorite child. When Adrian was born, he became the family's golden grandchild. Growing up with Nathan was unjust, all because he had a smoother mouth and was smarter than me. He was always able to win over adults. When I broke a glass, Mom scolded me, and I remained mute. But when Nathan shattered a glass, he would rush to Mom and tell her, "Dear Mom, your sweet son accidentally broke the glass." She would hold him and say, "It's okay." During dinner, anytime our parents had something new, he would immediately throw in a few comments like, "Mom, your new hair looks beautiful." Or, "Dad, you're a hero in my heart." I couldn't say those things. He knew more than simply how to captivate our parents. He also knew how to charm people with lavish compliments. That's why my parents gradually began to favor him. I assumed their preference would end as we were older, married, and had children. But it did not. My parents definitely distinguished between Mason and Adrian. They favored Adrian far too much. My parents only paid Mason a brief visit after his birth. But when Adrian was born, they gave him $5,000 to cover diapers and formula. In addition, my mother spent several days at the hospital assisting Nathan's wife in caring for Adrian. She took pictures of Adrian and posted them on her personal Facebook as the children grew older, but she never mentioned Mason. When we had family meals together, the topic was always about Adrian. Then over a year ago, we had a heated dispute on my father's birthday. After the party that day, my dad gave Adrian a gift, a plane ticket to Hawaii to accompany them. I questioned Mom about Mason's share. She said coldly, "Mason can go next time. If we ever make another trip, we'll bring him." After that, I stood up and complained about how unjust they were. Mom did not fight with me after I finished speaking. Instead, she added, "If you believe it is unfair, don't ever return to this house." Since then, I have stopped bringing my wife and Mason over. Return to the narrative of my grandmother's Christmas party. Mason spent a week before Christmas creating a lovely card to send to great-grandmother. The card was made of green paper that he cut into the shape of a Christmas tree. On the front, he created a small house with smoke curling from the chimney. Next to it sat an elderly lady with silver hair, smiling. Mason scribbled, "I love you, great-grandma. Merry Christmas," in unsteady red crayon letters near the base of the tree. He also affixed a small yellow star in the top right corner. Every night after supper, Mason would sit at the table and color the card. Every now and then he'd ask me, "Dad, does this look good?" When I nodded and said yes, his face would brighten up like he'd been rewarded. On Christmas morning, Mason went into the kitchen to assist Sophie with baking. They worked and joked together. Sophie would occasionally playfully rub some frosting on his nose, and the two would laugh. Mason's grin with his frosting-covered nose made me smile. When he saw me smiling, he dashed over and hugged my leg, leaving a spot of frosting on my pants. Sophie apologized to me, but I shook my head and softly smoothed Mason's hair. Seeing the grins on my son's and wife's faces in that warm kitchen, with the lovely smell of baked goodies in the air, I hoped that this year's Christmas party would be memorable, and I honestly believed I was correct in accepting Grandma's invitation. At the time, I had no idea that just a few hours later, my mother, Carol, would deliver us a shock we would never forget for the rest of our lives. Around 4 p.m., our family departed Denver for Grandma's place in Boulder. We had planned to arrive around 5 p.m., but due to gridlock caused by an accident, we arrived about 6:30 p.m. Mason sat in the back seat, repeatedly asking, "When will we get to your great-grandmother's house?" He clutched the card carefully, afraid it would get wrinkled. Sophie sat next me, occasionally peering over with an anxious expression, fearing we were arriving too late. My gut constricted as our automobile turned onto the familiar route that leads to Grandma's house. The two-story white house with the red tile roof appeared, surrounded by enormous oak trees decorated with glittering Christmas lights. The driveway and curb in front of the house were jam-packed with cars. I spotted Nathan's blue Honda Civic and my parents' silver Camry among the others. There were a couple other cars that I didn't recognize, most likely from distant relatives. At that point, my heart began to beat weirdly and nervously. It had been over a year since I last returned home or attended a gathering at my parents' house, since the day they favored Adrian in front of Mason. After finding a parking spot at the end of the street, we approached Grandma's front door and rang the doorbell. Sophie stood by me, carrying Mason, who was still holding the card and the box of cookies in his hands. I could hear laughter and talk from within, lovely Christmas music playing, and the aroma of great food wafting out. In less than a minute, the door opened slightly, revealing my mother, Carol, standing there. She was dressed in a red sweater with a reindeer motif, and her hair was nicely styled. Nothing like the plain woman I knew. It was difficult to express how I felt at that time. Half of me was relieved to see my mother after more than a year apart, but another half was concerned about how she would react. When she saw us, she looked from me to Sophie and then to Mason, who was grinning. Her gaze was as cold as ice, unlike the warmth I had hoped for. Then with the same chilly tone she said, "Go home. There's no room left." I froze after hearing those words. My heart appeared to freeze for a second and my mind spun, attempting to understand what had just occurred. Sophie stood behind me, stunned, her eyes wide with surprise. She reflexively tightened her hold on my hand. Mason was just over 6, but he understood what my mother had said. His smile faded slowly. His brilliant eyes became perplexed. He looked up at me, then at Sophie, perplexed about why we were being turned away. After a brief silence, I attempted to remain cool and told my mother, "Grandma invited us. There's no way there's no room." My mother responded quickly and dryly, "Helen told me if you showed up late, send you away." I stood there stunned, like if someone had squeezed the air straight out of my chest. She shut the door before I could say anything more, leaving my family alone. The cheery sounds of the party inside continued as if we hadn't been. Sophie gently stopped me as I grabbed for the doorbell once more, determined to learn the truth. I gazed at her. She shook her head. Her eyes filled with sorrow, and quietly whispered, let's go. I don't want Mason to see any more of this. I gazed down at my son. Mason stood there, wide-eyed and puzzled, still clutching the card and the box of cookies. With trembling voice, he asked, "Dad, why didn't Grandma let us in? I made this card for my great-grandmother." Hearing that simple question devastated me. I had no idea how to convey adults' brutality to a 6-year-old. I quickly got Mason up, took Sophie's hand, and walked away from Grandma's house. When we went to the car and I opened the door for Mason, he started crying. Tears ran down his cheeks as he cried, "Dad, I just wanted to give my great-grandmother the card." My heart broke while watching him cry. I hugged him close, feeling absolutely powerless. Sophie sat alongside me, her eyes crimson as she fought back tears. That was the moment I promised myself that I would never let my son see my mother, Carol, again. After leaving Grandma's place, I went to a local Denny's for dinner. On the way there, Mason was quietly sobbing and asking, "Dad, is great-grandmother mad at me?" Every question he asked seemed like a stab in my heart. Sophie had to calm him down by talking about the delicious cuisine he could get at Denny's. She said, "Do you want pancakes with maple syrup? Or maybe some crispy fried chicken? They even have cotton candy." Mason instantly perked up. His eyes lighted up when he heard about the cotton candy. He clasped his hands and said, "I want pancakes and cotton candy." I was pleasantly surprised by how quickly he recovered. That's the thing about kids. One moment they're bawling their eyes out, and the next they're smiling like if nothing happened. Looking in the rearview mirror, I noticed Mason had stopped weeping. Now he was full of food-related questions. Sophie looked over at me, her eyes apprehensive but yet relieved. Seeing our son happy again gave her some peace. When we pulled into the Denny's parking lot, I looked at the card and the box of cookies that was still on the back seat. I had lingering regrets and doubts about what had recently happened. Knowing how strict my grandma can be, it would not be out of character for her to refuse someone admittance simply because they were late. But the fact that my mother delivered the message made me mistrust everything. My phone unexpectedly rang as we were ready to enter Denny's. When I saw the name Grandma Helen on the screen, I hesitated for a second before going silent. I didn't want to talk to anyone right then, especially given what had transpired. Sophie glanced at me kindly as the phone rang again, saying, "You should pick up. Maybe something's wrong." I answered the phone while she was still speaking. Grandma's voice came through the speaker, full of concern. "Daniel, is everything okay? Why haven't you all arrived yet?" Her question caught me completely off guard. I promptly asked, "Didn't you tell my mom to send us away because we were late?" There was a slight pause. Then Grandma responded, visibly astonished. "I never said that." My brain exploded. So my mother had lied. Grandma hadn't told her to send us away. Anger and hurt flooded over me. I couldn't believe my mother could be so harsh, not just turning us away but also accusing Grandma of covering it up. After a period of stillness, Grandma spoke again with a harsh tone. "Come back. I'll get to the bottom of this." I let out a slow breath and responded, "I don't think making a big deal out of this is necessary. I'll stop by to see you another time." Suddenly, Grandma shouted. Something I'd never heard from her before. "Come back right now." I was stunned. I had never heard her so irate or commanding. Grandma Helen, who had always talked to me softly and lovingly, was now speaking with firmness and wrath. Her voice rendered me stunned. 30 seconds of silence passed. Then her voice came through again, calmer but still determined. "I'm sorry for raising my voice. Please bring your family back. I'll be waiting." Her genuine apologies destroyed something within me. Grandma was always the only person in the family who understood and actually loved me. If she asked, I couldn't refuse. In a hushed voice I said, "We'll come back right away." Sophie, who had overheard the entire conversation, looked at me with understanding. She nodded and said, "Let's go back." Mason stood in front of the restaurant, unsure what was going on. When he noticed us walking back to the car, he asked, "Mom, Dad, aren't we eating here anymore?" I softly touched his hair and murmured, "We're going to see Grandma Helen now." Mason sprang with delight as soon as I said it. "Dad, then let's go, hurry." After that we jumped in the car and drove as fast as we could back to Grandma's house. 10 minutes later, we were back in front of Grandma's house. This time she was already outside, waiting for us. Some distant aunts and uncles, as well as my parents and Nathan and his family, stood behind her. The scene before me was surprising. Everyone was standing outside on the porch in the cold Christmas night air. In the frigid temperatures, their breath formed little clouds. Grandma stood in the center with a stern scowl, while my folks stood off to the side, visibly annoyed. Nathan, my younger brother, became irritated as soon as we got out of the car. "Because of your family, Grandma and all of us had to wait out here in the cold." Before I could react, Grandma Helen yelled in a voice I'd never heard from her before. "Shut up!" Her voice rang across the calm night air. Nathan froze, startled to silence. He didn't say another thing. The other relatives were also quiet. Nobody dared to speak. Then Grandma came over to us. Her expression relaxed. She hugged Sophie and me, then went down to gently take Mason's hand. She spoke softly to him. "Great-grandmother has been waiting a long time for you." Mason smiled at her kindness, still clutching the card securely. As we entered the house, I passed my mother. I looked over and noticed her face pallid, her gaze avoiding mine. Sophie, who was strolling beside me, could sense the strain as well. She squeezed my hand tightly as if to give me strength. When we walked into the living room, I noticed everything had been nicely decorated for Christmas. A large tree stood in the corner, adorned with glittering decorations and twinkling lights. The table was piled high with wonderful food awaiting service, and the fireplace crackled softly, casting a comfortable warmth around the room. Everything was ideal for a Christmas gathering, except for the oppressive tension in the air. Grandma stood in the center of the room, her expression as serious as I had ever seen. In a strong and firm voice she said, "Before we continue with this celebration, some things need to be addressed." The room fell completely silent. Nobody dared to cough or even shift. Relatives gathered along the walls. Nathan and his wife stood by Adrian, while my parents hovered in the back as if they were trying to disappear. Suddenly Grandma turned to my mother and yelled with clear authority, "Carol, is there anything you'd like to say to me or to Daniel and his family?" Everyone in the room looked at my mother. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, pale as a sheet, hands trembling, unable to meet anyone's eyes. When she didn't speak, Grandma resumed, her tone stronger now. "This is my house, not yours. Who gave you the right to send Daniel and his family away?" That question landed like a slap. My mother sputtered, attempting to defend herself. I didn't. Daniel is lying. I didn't send anyone away." Grandma cut in with a voice that could freeze water as she continued to deny everything and tried to blame me. Enough. Then she turned to Uncle Bruce, a longtime neighbor who frequently assisted her with household repairs. She called out, "Bruce, pull up the footage from the front door." Uncle Bruce removed the tablet from Grandma's grasp without hesitation. He was knowledgeable about technology and frequently assisted her in setting up and using electronic gadgets. He accessed the security camera software with swift, practiced fingers and located the footage from the moment we arrived. The room was so quiet that you could hear the wall clock ticking. Mason stood alongside me, still holding his card, perplexed by everything. Sophie gripped my hand tightly, both of us tensed as we waited. A few seconds later, the familiar voice came through the tablet speaker, loud and clear. "Go home. There's no room left." My parents froze. Their features became pallid, their gaze fixed on the tablet as if it were a monster. Then the second sentence arrived, much colder and more cutting. "Helen told me if you showed up late, I had to send you away." My mother's voice was unmistakable. Flat, lifeless, and nasty. I looked around. My parents' and Nathan's family's reactions were similar to those of people who had been caught in the act. Nathan lowered his head, reluctant to look anyone in the eyes. His wife hugged Adrian closely, hiding him from what was happening. My father, Robert, stood still, his face devoid of any color. My mother was trembling so intensely that it appeared she could collapse. Whispers started to spread throughout the room. Relatives began talking to each other, throwing disapproving glances at my parents. No one could believe Carol, who they had always thought was kind, could be so harsh to her grandson. After the entire audience had heard everything, Uncle Bruce turned off the video and set the tablet down. His expression, too, betrayed silent displeasure at what had just been disclosed. The air surrounding me felt heavy and tense, making it difficult to breathe. But within, I felt relief, which I hadn't felt all evening. I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The truth had finally been revealed. A little while later, the room began to vibrate with noise. The guests began speaking up, openly criticizing my mother. Janet, my father's cousin, shakes her head and says, "Carol, I never thought you could do something like this." From the corner of the room, Uncle Mike, another cousin of my father, added, "This is too much. Christmas is about family being together. No one with a heart would kick their son and grandson out of a celebration. Even animals have more compassion than you, Carol." The voices of disapproval spread quickly. Whispers turned into loud comments. My mother stood there in complete isolation. No one spoke in her defense. 2 minutes later, Grandma raised her hand, and the entire room fell silent. Her authority in the family was absolute. Nobody dared to disobey her gestures. Then, with a chilly voice, she declared, "From this moment forward, I no longer have a son named Robert, and I have no daughter-in-law named Carol." The words hit the room like a flash of lightning. My father, Robert, screamed out in a panicked tone, "Mom, you can't do this." My mother broke down in tears, screaming and pleading, "I know I was wrong, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it." But Grandma had made up her mind. Her face was as hard as stone, unmoved and resolute. She had suffered injustice in our family for far too long. Before they could speak again, she shouted loudly and clearly with a final tone, "You have 30 days to leave the house you're living in. The estate in Highlands Ranch will be passed on to Daniel and his family. Tomorrow morning I'll begin transferring ownership, and a formal eviction notice will be issued." They stood there in shock. My parents' house was officially Grandma's, and the Highlands Ranch estate, one of her most valuable holdings, was now being passed down to us. My father stammered and his voice trembled. "You can't do this. I'm your son." Grandma stared him dead in the eye and stated, her voice full of disappointment, "You stopped being my son when you favored Nathan over Daniel. Now leave." Her remarks had a definitive impact. Robert and Carol remained transfixed like statues, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. Moments later, they turned and walked out discreetly, heads down, reluctant to catch anyone's eye. After my parents went, Nathan, my younger brother, stayed behind. He looked at Grandma, his voice stiff with fear, and asked, "What about me? I'm your grandson too." His question caught everyone off guard. Grandma looked at him with chilly eyes and an unreadable attitude. She answered simply, "You won't have a share. You saw your parents mistreat Daniel and said nothing. You even took pride in it. Don't think I didn't notice." Nathan attempted to defend himself. "But Grandma, I didn't get involved in what Mom and Dad did. Grandma lifted her hand, stopping him before he could finish. Then she said, "You stayed silent in the face of injustice and benefited from it. That makes you complicit." Nathan's face flushed in irritation as he heard this. He took his wife's hand and reached for Adrian. He spoke through clenched teeth, "Fine. If that's how it is, we're leaving." Before stepping out, Nathan turned to face me, his eyes filled with bitterness. He shouted, "Are you happy now, Daniel? You've torn this whole family apart." I stood quietly. I did not respond. Deep down, I didn't feel proud or triumphant. All I felt was deep, quiet sadness for everything that had been lost. Nathan stormed out, bringing his wife and son with him. Adrian, formerly the favored grandson, now resembled a bewildered youngster, entirely adrift in a position he couldn't comprehend. As the door closed again, the room went silent. The remaining family gazed at me with compassion, as if they had just witnessed the end of an era. At that point, I realized what was ahead. The aftermath and implications of Grandma's decision. After they went, Grandma asked that the party continue. She clapped her hands quietly and told everyone, "Let's enjoy this Christmas night. This is a time for real families to be together." The vibe in the room slowly reverted to normal. The remaining relatives did their best to ignore what had transpired and concentrate on the celebration. Laughter and talk gradually returned, though first stiff. Mason had been waiting for this moment all week. He hurried over to great-grandmother, holding the card in his hands. Shyly, he raised it and said, "Great-grandmother, this is the Christmas gift I made for you." Grandma took the card right away, her eyes lighting up as she saw the adorable illustrations. She hugged Mason tightly and remarked in a friendly tone, "Thank you, sweetheart. I will frame this card and hang it on the living room wall for everyone to see." Mason grinned from ear to ear, delighted that his present had been appreciated. Later, my wife brought out the cookies she had baked that morning for everyone to enjoy. The chocolate chip cookies were delicately adorned with multicolored candy pieces. Our family and neighbors could not cease admiring them. Janet said, "Sophie, these cookies are amazing. Can you share the recipe?" Uncle Bruce nodded. "Yes, they remind me of my childhood." Grandma helped slice and serve the cookies, and her face was brighter than it had been in a long time. It felt as if a big burden had been lifted from her shoulders as she watched everyone have fun. I softly thanked Grandma for what she had done for our family. We spent the night at Grandma's place because it was late and snow was falling. Mason slept with great-grandmother, while Sophie and I remained in the living room. I slept better than I had in years, as if I had finally escaped a nightmare that had lasted much too long. I assumed Grandma was angry when she disowned my father and cut him off from his fortune. But she was not joking. At 8 a.m., the next morning, after we had breakfast, toast and homemade sunny-side-up eggs, Grandma summoned her lawyer, Christian, to the house. He had been her attorney for many years, a well-dressed man in his 60s with silver hair and a calm professional demeanor. When Mr. Christian arrived, Grandma sat at the dining table to go over the legal processes. Sophie and I sat nearby as Mason played with the toys that Grandma had set out for him. Grandma gave the lawyer permission to begin the process of transferring ownership of two properties: the two-story house in Lakewood where my parents had been living, a property she had purchased for them 10 years before, and the estate in Highlands Ranch, which she now intended to pass down to me and my wife. Combined, those two properties were worth nearly $2 million. Mr. Christian took detailed notes on every element of her instructions for the legal documents. She also instructed him to submit an official notice, asking that my parents leave the Lakewood house within 30 days. Mr. Christian nodded and responded, "I'll prepare everything and send the formal documents later today." In that moment, I felt profound gratitude to Grandma, not for the money or the property, but for the fairness and justice she had delivered to our family. After the lawyer left, I jumped up, hugged her tightly, and remarked in an emotional voice, "Thank you, Grandma. I don't know what else to say." She softly patted my back and smiled. "I'm just doing what's right." Before we returned to our home, she hugged Mason firmly and told us, "Next time you visit, make sure to bake more cookies for me to give to the neighbors. They loved Sophie's cookies." Her simple suggestion made Sophie and me laugh. I informed her, "If you want, we can bake cookies daily and bring them to you." As we drove away from her house, I peeked in the rearview mirror and saw her waving farewell on the porch. And at that moment, I realized our lives had begun a new chapter. I assumed my parents would quietly leave after what transpired at Grandma's place. However, they didn't. Instead of accepting the consequences of their conduct, they retaliated recklessly. When they received the eviction notice from Christian, Grandma's attorney, they went to her house to demand explanations. Perhaps they hoped they could persuade her to change her mind, or at least make her feel guilty. After they had left, Grandma called me. Her voice seemed fatigued. She said, "Daniel, I need to let you know. Your parents came by and caused a scene. You should be careful. They might show up at your house too." Her account provided me with additional information about what occurred. My father had demanded that she return everything. My mother sobbed, claiming Grandma was pulling the family apart, but Grandma remained steadfast. Finally, she threatened to contact the police before they departed. And exactly as she had said, when I arrived home from work that afternoon, my parents and Nathan's family were standing in front of my Thornton home. I'd barely parked into the garage when I noticed their angry faces at my front door. As I went outside, Nathan approached, his face flushed with wrath. He pointed at me and said furiously, "You'll choke on that mansion, Daniel." My mother stood by him, her eyes red with tears, yet her speech was full with hatred. "I regret ever giving birth to you." That sentence coming from my mother stunned me. I stood motionless for a minute, but I held my ground. I refused to allow my emotions take over. Seconds after, my father stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. "If you still want us to consider you family, you'd better give up some of what Grandma gave you." They shouted and cursed at me for about 2 minutes. Neighbors started peering through their windows, intrigued by the disturbance. Instead of shouting or attempting to reason with them, I quietly took out my phone and contacted 911. When the wire was connected, I stated explicitly, "Hi, there are individuals outside my home threatening me." My father roared when he heard that. "You're calling the cops on your father?" I stared him directly in the eyes and responded coldly, "Are you confused? I don't know who you are." That phrase struck him like a slap. He stood there, speechless and flushed with wrath. Even Nathan appeared stunned. He had not expecting me to stand up like that. A little later, Nathan's wife tugged on his sleeve saying, "Let's go. The police will be here any minute." They hesitantly left, not wanting to risk being imprisoned for harassment. My parents entered their automobile, their faces full with wrath. Nathan gave me one final glance, full of contempt, before driving away. 2 officers came around 15 minutes later. I brought them inside and explained everything from start to finish. I also showed them footage from our security camera that clearly demonstrated the threats. Officer Johnson, an experienced middle-aged man, took copious notes. He inquired, "Would you like to file an official report?" Without hesitation, I nodded and told him, "Yes, I want this documented so I can apply for a restraining order. I'm worried they'll keep harassing my family." Only 1 week later, my parents and Nathan's family received a formal notice from the court. They were legally barred from contacting my family for the next 3 years. No visits, phone, calls, or emails. No interaction in any way. When I received a copy of the court order, I felt a sense of relief. Finally, my tiny family was safe from the people who had brought us so much anguish. My parents moved out of the house precisely 30 days after getting Christian's notice. That afternoon I drove over to check on the place and it was empty. They had left some old furniture and stains on the walls, but at least they had followed the court order. We did not move in. The mansion in Lakewood, while lovely, contained far too many terrible memories of the old family. Instead, I hired professionals to thoroughly rebuild it, including new paint, carpeting, and repairs throughout. Once the work was completed, I rented it to a family of 6 for $2,000 per month. We did not move into the Highlands Ranch estate that Grandma had given us. Sophie and I decided to stay in the Thornton home we bought together, one we built from the ground up and packed with memories. That was our real home. The estate had deteriorated over time due to a lack of sufficient maintenance. I spent approximately $150,000 to totally restore it, including replacing the plumbing and electrical systems, laying hardwood floors, modernizing the kitchen, and planting the garden. After refurbishing, I gave it over to Premium Property Management to maintain and lease. Depending on the rental agreement, I now get $6,000 to $10,000 per month from it. However, I did not waste that money on frivolous purchases. During the first month, we went to visit Grandma, and I tried to give her all of the rental revenue. She shook her head and politely refused. Keep it. That's the return on something I chose to give you. Use it to invest in Mason's future. Her remarks moved me greatly. I nodded in agreement. I opened a separate savings account for Mason and deposited the majority of his rental income. After everything we'd been through, I felt extremely fortunate to have Grandma in my life, not only because she gifted us these properties, but also because she taught me the true value of fairness and genuine love. It's been over a year since that awful Christmas night. Life has changed in ways I never expected. My parents are now residing in another location, Phoenix, Arizona, and rely on their retirement benefits. The large house and all of the amenities that Grandma had offered them for many years are no longer there. According to distant relatives, they live in a small apartment and rely on their monthly Social Security checks to get by. Nathan has not communicated with me since that day. He and his family relocated to Texas to start over. Adrian, once the golden grandson, is now a distant memory of the past. When I initially thought of the broken family, I felt a little melancholy. Childhood memories, especially those shaped by partiality, remained part of me. But gradually I realized that my life should center solely around my wife, my kid Mason, and my grandmother. We pay regular visits to Grandma on weekends. She is now 80 years old, with whiter hair and slower steps. But her mind remains sharp and her spirit happy. Mason always looks forward to seeing his great-grandmother, who adores him. I hope Grandma stays with us for many more years, so Mason will have even more memories with this amazing woman. Life is full of joy these days, especially since we're going to receive a new little angel. Sophie is 8 months pregnant, her tummy round and gorgeous, and Mason can't stop chatting to the baby inside. He frequently remarks, "Hey baby, I'll teach you how to play Legos and how to draw." At night, I consider myself fortunate to be wrapped up on the sofa watching a movie, Sophie putting her head on my shoulder and Mason sleeping in my lap. This is the bliss I've been seeking for all these years. Today, I offer my tale not to brag about my current situation, but so that anyone who has ever been mistreated, disregarded, or injured by their own family understands they are not alone. Most critically, they have the right to protect themselves. Never accept injustice simply because it comes from kin. Your kids deserve to be loved equally. Set boundaries if you tried to speak up but no one listened. Distancing oneself from poisonous people, especially if they are blood relatives, might sometimes be the best way to defend your house. You don't owe somebody the right to hurt you simply because they have your DNA. And only one day ago, I received a call from a distant relative. My parents currently live in Phoenix, near him. He called to reprimand me. He said that I was the reason our family came apart. Do you think I'm the cause my family split up? At my engagement party, my sister announced her pregnancy and joked about stealing the spotlight. Everyone, including my parents, ignored me. My sister announced her pregnancy at my engagement party, smirked and remarked, "Sorry, guess I stole the spotlight again, like I always do." Mom exclaimed eagerly, "Finally, some really exciting news worth celebrating." Dadi concurs. Babies are so much more important than simple engagements. Everyone laughed and congratulated her, except me and my fiancé. So the next day, we sent out a totally different save the date, announcing our elopement in Las Vegas that weekend. When she realized what it read, she called me and screamed. My name is Emma, and I am 29 years old. I've been with my fiancé, Ethan Miller, for 4 years, and he proposed to me 3 months ago in the most romantic way possible. We were trekking on our favorite trail, where we had our first date, when he dropped down on one knee near where we first kissed. It was wonderful, intimate, and everything I'd ever hoped for. I shed joyous tears for around 20 minutes straight. Now let me tell you about my sister, Jenna Bennett. She is 25 years old and has always been the golden child in our lives. I wish I were exaggerating, but I am not. Jenna Bennett achieved straight A's while I suffered from dyslexia. Jenna Bennett did varsity cheerleading, while I warmed the bench on JV. Jenna Bennett was accepted to Yale on early admission, whereas I attended community college before transferring to a public institution. Jenna Bennett was the one who got a high-paying marketing position right out of college, whilst I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay off my student loans. But here's what really gets me. Jenna Bennett has a habit of making everything about herself. I mean everything. She revealed her move to New York City during my college graduation banquet. When our grandma died, she used the funeral to inform everyone of her promotion. When I got my first car, she showed up for the family cookout in a shiny new BMW. It's as if she has a radar that detects when no one is looking at her, and she can't bear it. So, when Ethan Miller and I got engaged, I knew I needed to plan our engagement party carefully. I carefully chose a date when Jenna Bennett stated she couldn't make it. She had a work meeting in Denver. I thought, finally. Finally I could have a moment just for me and Ethan Miller. One time where I could enjoy happiness and love without Jenna Bennett stealing the show. I spent weeks planning this celebration. I have been talking for weeks. I made all of the decorations by hand, spent hours finding the ideal music, and even learned how to prepare the elegant hors d'oeuvres I saw on Pinterest. I gathered all of our friends and family, reserved our favorite restaurant's private dining room, and created the most stunning photo presentation of Ethan Miller and myself throughout our relationship. I had trouble sleeping the night before because I was so eager. The party was scheduled to commence at 6 p.m. on Saturday. At 5:30, I'm finishing up my makeup when I receive a text from Jenna Bennett. Surprise! The conference concluded early, and I got the final flight out. I just landed, and am on my way to your little celebration. My heart fell. I just knew she'd find a way to make this about herself. But I reminded myself to keep cheerful. Perhaps she will behave for once. Perhaps she'd simply be glad for me. I should have trusted my gut. The party began well. Everyone was socializing, admiring the decor, and applauding Ethan Miller and me. I felt as if I was shining. Ethan Miller looked stunning in his blue suit, and I adored how he kept his arm around my waist while proudly introducing me as his fiancée. For approximately an hour, everything went perfectly. Then Jenna Bennett arrived. She walked in wearing a magnificent red dress that probably cost more than I make in a month, with her hair flawlessly groomed, as if she had just come off a magazine cover. She made a spectacular entry, hugging everyone tightly, apologizing for being late, and ensuring that everyone noticed her arrival. But I did not mind. I was just glad to see her, and I truly believed she was there to rejoice with us. We were ready to cut the engagement cake when Jenna Bennett stepped up and tapped her champagne glass with a fork. "Excuse me everyone, I have an announcement." My blood turned icy. I looked at Ethan Miller and saw the same dread in his eyes. This was it. This was the moment she was going to take my thunder. "I know this is Emma and Ethan Miller's special day," Jenna Bennett said. And for a brief moment, I assumed she was just going to make a toast. "But I have some news that I just can't keep to myself any longer." She paused for dramatic effect, a familiar smirk developing across her face, the same smirk she'd worn when she announced her Yale acceptance at my high school graduation party. "I'm pregnant." The room exploded. I am not exaggerating. It literally burst with excitement. Everyone began screaming, clapping, and jumping up to congratulate her. My mother broke into floods of pleasure, coming up to hug Jenna Bennett and twirl her around. My father was beaming as if he had just won the jackpot. Our aunts and uncles were literally trampling each other to get to her. I stood there transfixed, clutching the knife we were meant to use to cut our engagement cake. Ethan Miller's arm tightened around my waist, and I could feel his rage spread throughout his body. But Jenna Bennett was not done. Oh no, she wasn't finished. She glanced directly at me, her smirk becoming broader, and added, "Sorry, guess I stole the spotlight again, like I always do." I felt as though I had been slapped. She spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, and a few people chuckled, as if it were a funny sister joke rather than a premeditated hit. But then my mother chimed in, and I really lost it. "Finally, some real exciting news worth celebrating," she shouted, still clutching Jenna Bennett. "I mean, engagements are nice, but a baby, this is what we've all been waiting for." My father nodded excitedly. Babies are so much more important than simple engagements. Jenna Bennett, honey. When are you due? Do you know if it's a boy or girl? Have you picked out names? Everyone chuckled and agreed, quickly focusing their attention on Jenna Bennett. They began asking her a million questions about her pregnancy, due date, symptoms, and plans. The engagement cake was forgotten on the table. The presentation I had spent hours creating was still playing on the screen, but no one was looking at it. I could feel tears in my eyes, but I refused to cry. I wouldn't give Jenna Bennett the joy of witnessing my breakdown. Ethan Miller clasped my hand, whispering, "Let's get out of here." I shook my head. I was not going to run away from my own engagement party. For the next 2 hours, I saw everyone adore Jenna Bennett. They discussed baby names, nursery themes, and pregnancy symptoms. They inquired about the father. Apparently, it's Derek. She has been dating him for 5 months. 5 months. She has known him for less than a year and is pregnant with his child. But that seems more deserving of celebration than my 4-year relationship with Ethan Miller. A few folks approached me during the night to congratulate me on my engagement. However, it felt like an afterthought, as if they were marking something off their social responsibility list before returning to the true thrill of Jenna Bennett's pregnancy. The worst part was having to watch my parents. My mother couldn't stop talking about how she was going to be a grandmother, how she needed to start organizing a baby shower, and how she was going to spoil her grandson rotten. My father was already talking about starting a college fund and teaching the kid to play baseball. They were more pleased about Jenna Bennett's pregnancy with Derek, a guy she'd been casually dating for 5 months, than they had ever been about my engagement to the love of my life. When the celebration finished, folks strolled out, congratulating Jenna Bennett and casually noting my engagement. "Congrats on the baby, Jenna Bennett. Oh, and Emma, nice party. Good luck with the wedding planning." Ethan Miller and I were left to tidy up the decorations and carry away the untouched engagement cake. I finally allowed myself to cry as I put away the Emma and Ethan Miller napkins and took down the streamers I had painstakingly strung that morning. "I can't believe she did that," Ethan Miller exclaimed, his voice filled with rage. "I can't believe your parents just went along with it." "I can," I replied coldly. "This is exactly what I expected would happen." "We should have eloped," he mumbled, tossing crumpled napkins into a garbage bag. "We should have just gone to Vegas and avoided all this family drama." And that's when the idea struck me. That night I was unable to sleep. I kept revisiting the evening in my head, Jenna Bennett's smile, my mother's comment about really wonderful news, my father dismissing our engagement as trivial, and how everyone laughed when Jenna Bennett mentioned stealing the stage. I was finished. I was so tired of being the afterthought, the consolation prize, the less significant sibling. I was tired of Jenna Bennett making everything about her and my parents allowing her conduct. I was done being kind, understanding, and taking the high road. I sought vengeance. Around 3 a.m., I shook Ethan Miller awake. "You said we should have eloped," I murmured. "What?" he said, still half sleeping. "You said we should have eloped. Let's do it." He sat up, instantly alert. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Let's go to Vegas this weekend. Let's get married and not tell anyone until after it's done." Ethan Miller remained quiet for a long time. "Emma, are you sure? You've been planning this big wedding for months. You have the venue booked, the dress ordered, the photographer lined up." "I don't care about any of that anymore," I declared. And I meant it. "I want to marry you, Ethan Miller. I want to be your wife. I don't need a big wedding with all the people who think my engagement is less important than Jenna Bennett's accidental pregnancy." "What about your parents? What about Jenna Bennett? They're going to be furious." "Good," I said. "Let them be furious. I'm tired of caring about their feelings when they clearly don't care about mine." We spent the following hour arranging our elopement. We located a chapel in Vegas that could marry us on Saturday, booked flights on Friday night, and reserved a hotel room on the Strip. It was impetuous, crazy, and entirely unlike me. But for the first time in years, I felt in charge of my own life. But this is where my vengeance truly came into play. On Sunday morning, instead of sending out save the dates for our original October wedding, I sent out new ones. But they weren't ordinary save the dates. These were especially created to make a statement. The front of the card had a gorgeous snapshot of Ethan Miller and me from our engagement photos, along with elegant script that read, "Emma and Ethan Miller, just married." Then in smaller print below, "We eloped in Las Vegas on March 15, 2025, surrounded by strangers who were genuinely excited for us." But the back of the card was where I really went for the kill. It reads, "We want to thank everyone who attended our engagement party last Saturday. It was eye-opening to see who actually supported our love and who came for the free food and drinks. We recognized that the most essential thing was not to have a large wedding with people who saw our love as trivial or unimportant in comparison to other life events. Instead, we chose to celebrate our commitment in a setting where strangers applauded us more than some of our own family members did at our engagement party. We got married by Elvis at the Little Chapel of Hearts in Las Vegas, and it was perfect. We laughed, sobbed, and swore to love one another forever, without anyone attempting to take our attention or reduce our happiness. We will host a small celebratory dinner for people who have truly supported us throughout our partnership. If you're not sure if you'll be invited, ask yourself this. Did you congratulate us at our engagement party before congratulating someone else on an unrelated announcement? If the answer is no, you will probably not hear from us. Love, always. Ethan Miller and Mrs. Thompson. P.S. We'll be on honeymoon in Hawaii for the next 2 weeks, so don't anticipate rapid responses to calls or texts. I realize it seems harsh, but I didn't care about being courteous or diplomatic. I was weary of playing the greater guy while everyone else got to be selfish and careless. I had 150 save the dates made overnight by a quick printing firm and sent them out via express delivery on Monday morning to everyone who had been invited to our first wedding. Family, friends, co-workers, everyone. I wanted Jenna Bennett and my parents to get the word loud and clear. Ethan Miller and I left for Vegas on Friday night, and it was the best decision we'd ever made. Our wedding was small, intimate and beautiful. The Elvis impersonation was just hilarious. The chapel was delightfully corny, and we both laughed until we wept. Complete strangers applauded us on the street, brought us drinks and celebrated alongside us as if we were old friends. It was exactly what our engagement party should have been. We were in our hotel room on Sunday night, still dressed for the wedding, ordering room service and looking at our wedding photos, when my phone started going wild. First, it was my mother, then my father, then Jenna Bennett, then my aunts and uncles, then my friends. Text after text, call after call. Everyone was stressing out about the save the dates they had received that day. But word had already spread via family group chats and social media. I disregarded them all. Ethan Miller and I ordered champagne and strawberries and held our own secret party. We were married. We were pleased. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what others thought. But Jennifer Bennett. Jenna Bennett was persistent. She called me a dozen times on Sunday night. 12. When I did not respond, she began messaging. What the hell is wrong with you, Emma? Are you really this petty? Mom and Dad are sobbing. Are you happy now? You are being silly. Emma, I'm pregnant. I'm afraid and excited, and I needed my family's support. You cannot be married without informing anyone. This is ridiculous. Call me back right away. I deleted all texts without responding. Monday morning, she took a different approach. She dialed Ethan Miller's phone. Ethan Miller, please. You have to talk to Emma. She's lost her mind. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Ethan Miller, bless him, has just said, Jenna Bennett. Emma and I are married now. And we're very happy. We're not interested in discussing this further. He hung up. That's when she completely lost it. She began contacting my workplace, my friends, and everyone she could think of who might be able to reach me. She even contacted my best friend Lisa, and cried about how I was wrecking the family and how she hadn't meant to hurt anyone. Lisa, who had been at the engagement party and seen the entire incident, simply told her, Jenna Bennett, you made your bed. Now you have to lie in it. The calls and texts lasted 3 days. By Tuesday, everyone had received their save the dates, and the family drama had reached a boiling point. My parents begged me to come home so that we could talk this through like a family. My relatives and uncles were separated. Some believed I was being overly harsh. Others said Jenna Bennett had it coming. Some of my friends were taken aback by the scathing save the dates, but the majority were secretly proud of me for finally sticking up for myself. But the most unexpected response came from my grandma on my father's side, Grandma Rose. She's 84 years old and has always been the family peacekeeper, resolving problems and encouraging everyone to get along. So when Mom contacted me on Tuesday morning, I believed she was going to give me a sermon about family togetherness and forgiveness. Instead, she stated, Emma, honey, I've been watching this dynamic between you and Jenna Bennett for years, and I should have said something sooner. I was so astonished that I almost dropped my phone. Grandma. Your sister has been doing this stunt since she was 3 years old, and your parents have allowed it because they thought it was easier than dealing with tantrums. But as I watched what transpired at your engagement party and saw how devastated you were, I understood I had also contributed to the problem. She went on to tell me about situations I'd forgotten, such as when I was 7 and won first place in the school science fair, and Jenna Bennett threw such a tantrum that my parents decided to take us both out for ice cream to celebrate Jenna Bennett's participation prize. Or when I was 16 and earned my driver's license, Jenna Bennett announced she was dating the most popular boy in school at my birthday dinner. I kept telling myself Jenna Bennett was just spirited, that she'd grow out of it, Grandma Rose said. But she's 26 years old, Emma. She's a grown woman. And she's still pulling the same stunts she did as a toddler. I never thought you noticed, I murmured with tears flowing down my cheeks. Oh, I noticed. I just didn't want to rock the boat. But honey, sometimes the boat needs to be rocked. Sometimes it needs to be capsized completely. She told me she was pleased with me for finally sticking up for myself, and she thought my save the dates were amazing, albeit a little harsh. She also stated that she had been taking calls from various family members concerning the situation, and her response to every one of them was the same. Emma did what she had to do. That talk meant more to me than words can explain. Knowing that someone else had noticed the pattern, that I wasn't insane or oversensitive, and that my sentiments were real, was extremely healing. The following phone startled me. It was from my cousin Jessica. She's Jenna Bennett's age, and I've always believed she was more like Jenna Bennett than myself. She called on Tuesday afternoon, while Ethan Miller and I were receiving massages at the spa. Emma, I need to tell you something, she said. I've been wanting to say this for years, but I never had the courage. What is it? Jenna Bennett does this to everyone, not just you. She did it at my graduation party when she announced she was moving to New York. She did it at my bridal shower when she made that whole dramatic speech about being single and loving it. She even did it at my baby shower when she spent the entire time talking about her promotion and how she was too busy with her career to think about kids. I had no idea. Jenna Bennett and Jessica had always appeared so close, but Jessica had never mentioned any of this. Why didn't you ever say anything? I requested an explanation. Because I didn't want to cause drama. Because I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. Because Jenna Bennett always made it seem like she was just sharing good news, not trying to upstage anyone. But watching her at your engagement party, seeing that smirk on her face, I realized it was always intentional. Jessica went on to describe additional occurrences, such as family gatherings where Jenna Bennett would arrive with big news just as someone else was being celebrated. She had done it to our other cousins, family acquaintances, and even our great-aunt Margaret, who was celebrating her 50th wedding anniversary. I think she's been getting away with it because she spreads it around, Jessica told me. She doesn't target the same person every time, so no one realizes there's a pattern. But there is a pattern, Emma. There's definitely a pattern. This revelation was both affirming and frustrating. It meant Jenna Bennett's behavior was more than just sibling rivalry or family dynamics. It was a deliberate habit of attention-seeking that she'd been repeating with other people for years. By Wednesday morning, I had received messages from folks I hadn't heard from in years. Jenna Bennett's high school classmates remembered her performing similar exploits at school functions. College classmates had observed her behavior at several parties. Even some of Ethan Miller's acquaintances said that Jenna Bennett made comments or statements that appeared to be intended to divert attention away from others. The most unexpected communication came from my former roommate, Kelly, with whom I lived during my junior year of college. She sent me a lengthy text. Emma, I've been following this drama through mutual friends, and I have to tell you, Jenna Bennett called me 3 years ago when you got promoted at work. She was asking all these questions about your relationship with Ethan Miller, about your job, about your plans for the future. At the time, I thought she was just being a concerned sister, but now I'm wondering if she was gathering information to use against you somehow. The more I discovered about Jenna Bennett's pattern of behavior, the angrier I felt. She was more than just impetuous and attention-seeking. She was also strategic. She was calculating. She had been purposefully damaging other people's happiness for years. But the message that really got to me came from Amanda, my best friend from high school, with whom I had lost touch after graduation. She sent me this Facebook message. Emma, I saw your cousin post about your situation on social media, and I had to reach out. I've been thinking about this for years, and I think Jenna Bennett is the reason we lost touch. She went on to say that after our high school graduation, Jenna Bennett contacted and told her that I was too busy with my new college pals to maintain old friendships. She said I had specifically informed her that I didn't want to keep in touch with individuals from high school since I was moving on to bigger and better opportunities. I was so hurt, Amanda wrote. I thought you'd become stuck up and didn't want to be friends with someone who was going to community college. I never reached out because I thought you looked down on me. But seeing how Jenna Bennett treated you at your engagement party, I'm starting to wonder if she lied to me about what you said. I was devastated. Amanda had been one of my closest friends, and I'd always wondered why she stopped responding to my phone calls and messages after graduation. I imagined she was preoccupied with her own affairs, but it turned out Jenna Bennett had purposefully harmed our friendship. I immediately called Amanda and we spoke for 2 hours. She told me she'd always regretted losing touch with me and had considered reaching out over the years but was too embarrassed by the mistake. We made plans to meet up when I returned from my honeymoon. These discussions were eye-opening in the most unpleasant way. They demonstrated that Jenna Bennett's behavior was more than just a family issue. It was a pattern that had influenced many aspects of my life. She had been eroding my relationships, accomplishments, and happiness for years, and I had been too close to the issue to see it properly. Throughout it all, Ethan Miller was great. He listened to every phone conversation, held me while I wept, and never indicated that I was exaggerating or being overly dramatic. He'd seen some of Jenna Bennett's conduct over the years, but he was astounded by the severity of it. "I'm very sorry," he remarked after I told him about Amanda. "I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this for so long without realizing what was happening." "I feel so stupid," I said. "How didn't I see it? How could I have missed the fact that she was doing this intentionally?" "Because you're a good person," he replied. "You have a positive attitude toward everyone, especially your family. You wanted to think that Jenna Bennett's actions were merely a coincidence or bad timing, not evil intent." That night, I reached a choice. I wasn't going to ignore Jenna Bennett's calls and texts anymore. I was going to block her phone number totally. I was going to block her on all social media platforms. I was going to cut off all contact, at least until I could comprehend what I'd discovered. I also decided to contact some of the people who had been affected by Jenna Bennett's actions throughout the years. I wanted to apologize for not recognizing what was going on sooner, and I wanted to try to heal some of the relationships that had been harmed by her intervention. The conversation with Amanda was only the beginning. I reconnected with several old friends who had been driven away by Jenna Bennett's deception and manipulation. I had open discussions with family members about the pattern of behavior that we had all observed but never addressed. I even contacted some of Ethan Miller's friends to apologize for Jenna Bennett's inappropriate comments and behavior at various events over the years. It was exhausting and emotional, but also liberating. For the first time in my life, I saw Jenna Bennett's behavior objectively, without the filter of family loyalty or the assumption that she meant well. Then, on Wednesday, I received the call I had been waiting for. I was lying by the hotel pool on Maui, sipping a Mai Tai and reading a book, when my phone rang. Jenna Bennett's name flashed across the screen. I almost didn't respond, but something compelled me to. "What do you want, Jenna Bennett?" "Emma, please. We need to talk. I am at the airport. I'm flying to Hawaii." I sat up so fast that I almost knocked over my drink. "You are what?" "I'm coming to Hawaii. I need to see you. We need to remedy this." "Jenna Bennett, you're not flying to Hawaii. Ethan Miller and I are on a honeymoon, our honeymoon after our wedding, which you tried to destroy." I didn't intend to damage anything. I was thrilled with my pregnancy and wanted to share it with my family, at my engagement party. "Jenna Bennett, you announced your pregnancy at my engagement party and then smirked for stealing the show. Do not attempt to change history." I was joking. That was a joke. I didn't expect you to take it so seriously. "Is this a joke? You thought humiliating me in front of all my friends and family was funny?" "I did not humiliate you. You announced your pregnancy at my engagement party, said you stole the spotlight like you always do, and then watched while Mom and Dad dismissed my engagement as less important than your accidental pregnancy with a guy you've known for 3 months." She was silent for a long time. Then, in a lower voice, she said, "Derek and I broke up." "What?" "Derek and I have broken up. When I told him about the pregnancy, he declared he wasn't ready to become a father and fled. I'm going to be a single mother. Emma. I am afraid." So there it was. The true reason she called. Not because she felt horrible about what she had done, but because her perfect little pregnancy announcement had gone wrong, and she now needed help. "I am sorry that happened to you, Jenna Bennett. I actually am. But this does not change what you did to me. But I need you, Emma. I need my family. I made a mistake, okay? I apologize. I sincerely apologize." "You're sorry Derek left you. You are not sorry for what you did to me." "That's not true, isn't it? If Derek was still in the picture, and your pregnancy announcement had gone as planned, would you call me to apologize? Would you have considered how your actions affected me at my engagement party?" She didn't respond, which was enough. "Jenna Bennett. I have spent my entire life being understanding of your behavior. I have made excuses for you. I have taken the high road. I have been a bigger person, But I am done. I'm done being your fallback plan when your real life fails. You are my sister, and mine. But you have never acted as such. You've spent our entire lives competing against me rather than supporting me. You've made everything about you, and I've allowed it, because I love you and want to keep the peace. But I am married now, Jenna Bennett. I have a husband who loves me and prioritizes me, and I am not going to let you, or anybody else, treat me as an afterthought anymore. So that's it? You're just going to cut me out of your life? I am going to quit allowing you to hurt me. If you want to be in my life, you must earn it. You'll have to show that you can be happy for me without making it about yourself. You'll have to show me that you're concerned about my feelings and happiness. I do care. No, you do not. You want me to be there for you when you need me. There is a distinction. She began crying. Loud, dramatic sobs that I'd heard 1,000 times before. Please don't do this, Emma. I'm pregnant and alone, and I need my family. You should have considered that before announcing your pregnancy at my engagement party, and then smirking about stealing the show. I said I was sorry. No. You admitted you made a mistake. You said you were joking. You claimed you didn't mean to hurt anyone. But you never sincerely apologized for what you did. You never admitted that it was incorrect. You just want me to get over it so you can continue to treat me any way you want. That's not, Jenna Bennett. I'm going to hang up now. I'm on my honeymoon with my husband, and I'm not going to let you destroy it either. Emma, wait. I hung up. Ethan Miller gazed at me from his lounge chair. How do you feel? Good, I replied, and I meant it. I feel really good. The rest of our honeymoon was fantastic. We flew from Vegas to Maui for a week of snorkeling, hiking, eating delicious food, and discussing our future plans. We discussed the house we wanted to buy, the children we wanted to have, and the travels we wanted to take. We discussed everything, except my family drama. When we returned home, there were flowers waiting for us. My parents sent me 24 roses with a card saying, "We're sorry, we love you, please call us." Jenna Bennett sent a tiny bouquet of daisies with a letter that simply said, "I'm sorry, I love you." I arranged the flowers in vases, but did not call anyone immediately away. I needed time to digest what had transpired. A week later, my mother called. "Emma, honey, please, can we talk? Can you and Ethan Miller come over for dinner? I promise Jenna Bennett won't be here." I consented, primarily because I missed my parents and wanted to know if they were truly sorry, or if they were just trying to smooth things over. The dinner was odd at first. My folks were walking on eggshells, overly polite and cautious with their remarks. But eventually we started communicating openly. "We were wrong," my father remarked. "We were so caught up in the excitement of Jenna Bennett's news that we forgot it was your special day. That wasn't fair to you." "We've always made excuses for Jenna Bennett's behavior," my mom said. "We told ourselves that she was just excited, that she didn't mean any harm. But watching you walk away from your own engagement party, seeing how hurt you were, we realized we've been enablers." "Jenna Bennett has always been dramatic," my father explained. "Even as a little kid, she needed to be the center of attention. We thought it was cute when she was 5. But we should have corrected it instead of encouraging it. We're proud of you for standing up for yourself," my mother told me. "We don't like the way you did it. But we understand why you felt you had to." It was the first time my parents had acknowledged Jenna Bennett's pattern of behavior, or admitted to being part of the problem. It did not solve everything, but it was a start. "What about Jenna Bennett?" I questioned. "How is she doing?" "She's struggling," my mother explained. "Being pregnant and alone is hard. She's about 7 months along now. But she's also doing some soul searching. She's been going to therapy." "Good," I said. "She needs it. She wants to talk to you," my father remarked. "She's been working on a real apology. Not just, 'I'm sorry you were hurt,' but taking responsibility for her actions." "I'm not ready for that yet," I said. "Honestly, maybe someday. But not yet." They accepted it, and we spent the remainder of the evening discussing various topics. They inquired about our wedding, honeymoon, and future plans. They were really concerned for our satisfaction, rather than just going through the motions. It's been 4 months since the engagement party fiasco and our unexpected elopement. Jenna Bennett has reached out several times, but I have yet to answer. I know she had a baby, a young girl named Lily, and she is still unmarried. A part of me feels horrible for her. But a larger part of me is still enraged. My parents have made an attempt to improve their relationship with Ethan Miller and myself. They've invited us over for supper several times and have shown real interest in our life. They're enthusiastic about the house we're buying and have been supportive of my choice to return to school for my master's degree. My friends have been fantastic. Most of them have informed me that they have been waiting years for me to confront Jenna Bennett. Lisa stated she was very proud of me for finally prioritizing myself. Even some of my extended family members have contacted me to express their support for my decision. The savage save the dates are legendary in our family. My relative shared one on social media, with my permission, and it became viral. Thousands more individuals commented on their own family dramas, saying they wished they had the bravery to do what I did. The nicest aspect of it all, however, is my marriage. Ethan Miller and I are ecstatic. We are a team, and we will always support one another. He has never made me feel horrible about how I handled things with Jenna Bennett. He's never pressed me to forgive her or reconcile with her. He simply loves me and supports my decisions. We're talking about having children in a few years, and I know that when we do, our children will be raised to assist rather than compete with one another. They will learn that love is not a limited resource and that celebrating someone else's happiness does not lessen your own. I am not sure if Jenna Bennett and I will ever have a meaningful relationship again. Maybe eventually, if she does the work and shows me she has truly changed. But for now, I'm concentrating on my own happiness and life. I am done being the bigger person. I'm done making excuses for other people's poor behavior. I'm done putting everyone else's sentiments ahead of my own. I'm Claire Bennett now, and I'm finally living life on my own terms. And you know what? It feels incredible. Update. It's been 8 months since I first posted this, and I thought I'd provide an update because so many people have asked. First, Ethan Miller and I are doing fantastic. We purchased our house, and I began my master's program. Ethan Miller received a raise at work, and we are planning a trip to Europe next year. We're definitely considering starting a family in the next few years, and I've never been happier. My parents and I have repaired our relationship. They have consistently been supportive and respectful of my boundaries. They never bring up Jenna Bennett unless I ask, and they've stated unequivocally that they understand why I did what I did. Jenna Bennett's situation is more difficult. She contacted me 2 months ago with a long letter, an actual letter. Handwritten, not via text or email. In it, she accepted full responsibility for her actions, not only at my engagement party, but throughout our lives. She admitted to being selfish and attention-seeking, and she apologized for all the times she stole my moments or made everything about herself. She also informed me about her therapy sessions and how she has been trying to figure out why she felt compelled to compete with me rather than encourage me. She said that she was insecure and jealous of me, which surprised me because I had always thought she was the more accomplished person. The letter was different. It felt real. Unlike her past apologies. She did not make excuses or attempt to defend her actions. She just owned it. But here's the thing. I'm still not prepared. Maybe I'll never be. The pain is too deep, and I'm finally content. Without the drama and stress that comes with attempting to control Jenna Bennett's emotions and conduct. I responded with a short note, recognizing her letter and wishing her well, but making it obvious that I'm not ready for a relationship right now. I told her I was delighted she was getting help, and wished she could be the person her daughter deserved. Some folks believe I am being too tough. They believe I should forgive her and go forward. However, I've learned that forgiveness does not imply that you must accept someone back into your life. I can forgive Jenna Bennett for my own peace of mind while still protecting myself from further harm. I'm not the same person I was a year earlier. I am stronger, more confident, and more eager to advocate for myself. I have a spouse who loves me unconditionally. Parents who see me as a person rather than Jenna Bennett's sister, and friends who support my decisions. I do not regret how I handled things. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Was it petty? Maybe. However, it was also necessary. It was the wake-up call my family required. And that was the moment I quit being a doormat. Sometimes you have to burn bridges to see the road forward. And occasionally, the individuals who are intended to be in your life will forge new paths to reach you. I'm finished apologizing for putting myself first. I'm done feeling bad about demanding basic respect and regard. I'm tired of being the family scapegoat, expected to accept whatever conduct others dish out. I am Claire Bennett. And I'm finally living my life for myself.